Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel below. We love to know what you want to hear next. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 561, The Exiled Baby. Eternal Peace. Imperial Preceptor frowned and looked at the battlefield. There were numerous will-o'-the-wisps that were messengers of death carrying lanterns. The boats carried the souls that had died in battle toward Yudu. If they didn't let the messenger of death bring Qin Mu away and tried fighting, so many messengers of death would probably turn Supreme Emperor Heaven into a white land. He looked at Qin Mu and muttered to himself irresolutely. I've been to Yudu twice already. The first time I was lured in by Dutian Devil King. I was the one who saved you and sent you back to the world of the living, said the elder from behind the lantern. Astonished, Qin Mu looked over. He still couldn't see the man's face, however. The second time, Grandmaster, Fatty Dragon, White Bat Brothers, and I fell into Yudu together, and we survived again. Qin Mu composed himself and walked out of the flying ship. He came to the small boat and turned back to wave at everyone. He said with a warm smile, Yudu isn't as dangerous as you guys imagine it to be. I'm going to talk about the cause and effect of the 48,000 souls being back, and I'll be back once it's done. The dragon Qilin opened his mouth, wishing to speak, but he gave it some thought and suppressed the urge. Cult Master is being foolish. How is Yudu not dangerous? There are strange monsters everywhere, and there is even Saturn Star Sovereign, that terrifying monster. However, my position is now in danger as well. I look bad with Brother Tiger for comparison, so it's best if I don't talk. Otherwise, if Cult Master blows up now, I won't be able to get any more spirit pills again. The Black Tiger God took a step forward and was about to talk, but Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor raised his hand to stop him. He shook his head and said, Does Cult Master want to leave his corporeal body behind? Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly, and he instantly understood what the other was trying to say. Imperial Preceptor wanted him to leave his corporeal body behind. If Qin Mu couldn't return, they could cast Soul Guide to seize his soul back by force. Imperial Preceptor doesn't have to worry. Qin Mu plucked the young dragon from his ear and sent it away before waving at everyone. It's safer for me to bring my corporeal body along. I shall borrow this little dragon once I'm back from Yudu. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was slightly stunned, not understanding his intention. While he wondered about it, the small boat sailed away leisurely and vanished into the darkness. The young dragon flew back onto the ship and ran to Qin Yu to coil around his body. Why didn't Cult Master leave his corporeal body behind? Puzzled, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor kept muttering under his breath. If a few gods executed the spell Soul Guide at the same time, we should be able to summon his soul back from Yudu. Qin Mu stood on the small boat and looked around. He saw boats full of souls in the darkness, all sailing towards the depths of Yudu. Their lanterns were very dim, and from far away, they looked like stars moving through a pure black sky. King Yama had once told Qin Mu to go to Yudu at least once if he got the chance. This was why he had rejected Imperial Preceptor's suggestion. King Yama wasn't clear with his words, but Qin Mu could still detect that his birth in Yudu wasn't simple. Earth Count Summon was a rare chance, so he might even discover the secret of his birth. The little boat floated at a very fast speed, but he couldn't feel its movement while sitting inside. He could only see the dim world rushing past him. Qin Mu's heart trembled. He had boarded the boat in Supreme Emperor Heaven, and he could see it disappearing into the distance. While in the boat, he saw numerous other worlds. From magnificent ones, small boats with lanterns came sailing out without end. Looking from far away, the dark sky in those worlds and the faint lamplight brought wild and fanciful thoughts. He couldn't help fantasizing about those worlds, the stories that were unfolding there on a magnificent scale. Maybe they were of melancholy and hidden bitterness, maybe of heroism, or just human emotions. It's actually the fourth time you are in Yudu. At the bow of the boat, the messenger of death hung his lantern and turned around to face Qin Mu. He said in a steady voice, You were born in Yudu, so this is the fourth time. Qin Mu's interest was aroused and he asked, Senior, I have no memory of when I was born. So may I ask if Senior could tell me about it? When you were born, you created quite a commotion and shook all the worlds in Yudu. In the end, most of the big shots came to an agreement to exile you. Qin Mu examined the face of the elder in detail, but he still couldn't see his true appearance. Thus, you were exiled. As for what happened afterward, I don't know, the messenger of death said slowly. Qin Mu was stunned and burst out into laughter. When I was born, I was definitely a small baby, so how could I have caused a huge commotion? And for the big shots of Yudu to exile a baby, isn't it a bit too much? It's already very generous. The messenger of death said steadily. In my eyes, us exiling you after all you've done was already very generous of us. After you were out, those big shots were so happy they celebrated for days. What exactly did I do? Qin Mu was even more puzzled. What could an infant do? The messenger of death didn't answer. The small boat sailed into a world and went through it. After a moment, they came to a small world inside it. Qin Mu raised his head and looked at the sun, moon, and the 5 elements as well as the stars in the sky that were abnormally beautiful. They shone with multicolored lights. There was also a divine bridge in the sky with a primordial spirit in the shape of a god. This is the divine treasure of a strong practitioner of divine bridge realm. Qin Mu was astonished. We have entered the divine treasure of a strong practitioner. The messenger of death took out a notebook and flipped it open. He found a name and said, Han Zhen, your lifespan is over. I will fetch you after 3 days. Settle what you need to do. The primordial spirit on the bridge looked down with a dim gaze. I understand. Thank you, messenger of death, for giving me 3 days' time. The messenger of death nodded. His small boat sailed out of the small world and returned to Yudu. He continued to head forward. Once a person is born, they make a pact with Earth Count for their souls to go to Yudu after their lifespan runs out. The messenger of death that was going to inform you had planned to enter your life and death divine treasure to tell you about Earth Count's orders. But who would have known that he'd be blocked by the treasure on your body? That's why I had no other choice but to go to the world of the living to find you. The longer this matter is delayed, the worse it will be for you. Feeling even more bewildered, Qin Mu asked with a smile, I'm on 6 Directions realm, so my life and death divine treasure hasn't even opened yet. So how could the messenger of death enter it? To you, it may be shut, but to the messengers of death, they are all open. When we enter a person's life and death divine treasure to send information, it's like giving them a dream, the messenger of death said. However, we were blocked by the treasure on your body and couldn't enter your dream. Qin Mu took out his jade pendant and asked, the treasure you keep mentioning, is it this jade pendant? Where did it come from? Does it have some curse? Wear it properly. Don't take it down. The messenger of death admonished him in a hurry. Qin Mu could only hide it back under his clothes. The messenger of death was still wary and took out a yellow joss paper to stick it on Qin Mu's face. He took down the lantern and shone it on the surrounding darkness. Which Dao friend is lying low in the vicinity? Qin Mu poked 2 holes in the yellow joss paper and looked around. Everything was dark, and he couldn't see anything. Suddenly, the light of the lantern fell on a slimy body. It moved quickly, and its scales reflected all kinds of lights which soon vanished. The messenger of death muttered irresolutely for a moment before sneering. He is someone Earth Count wants to meet, so don't try anything. Otherwise, you won't be able to pay for your crimes. Soft laughter came from the surroundings of the boat as strange devil eyes lighted up. Those eyes were huge and surrounded the whole boat. Earth Count wants to see him, so we won't obstruct. After all, we also live in Yudu and seek a place under the name of Earth Count. However, we also have masters and have received an order to find him. Voices came from all directions, followed by strange laughter. They were like worms crawling in one's body and speaking as they gnawed on the bone. Sovereign equal to heaven, your general governor of heavenly talismans, an official sovereign of Yudu, so we should be somewhat respectful to you. However, you covered his face to prevent us from seeing his face and learning his identity. So how are we going to answer our master? Remove the yellow talisman, and we will let you take him away. The messenger of death sneered. and the eyes suddenly closed and vanished. A boat came sailing over. It had an elder carrying a lantern that lit up the surroundings. In the darkness, numerous slimy bodies slithered away from the light. Qin Mu's gaze flickered, and he saw more and more small boats sailing toward them. They overlapped with their boat, and the messengers of death also did the same. In the blink of an eye, some 60-70 boats and messengers of death overlapped to become one. "Now we won't have to worry about them," he said. "Who were the ones who stopped us?" Qin Mu asked immediately. "Gods and devils planted by the celestial heavens." The messenger of death shook his head. "A bunch of fellows who reap things they did not sow." Qin Mu fell into his thoughts as the small boat continued to sail forward. Finally, he saw Earth Count once more. Of course, it wasn't the complete form, just the horns of 9 bends. Layers of worlds formed them. The closer the boat went, the bigger the 2 horns looked, forming incomparably huge lands on them. Countless volcanoes erupted to connect the lands together. The paper boat traveled through one, and Qin Mu saw countless souls moving with difficulty through a world of magma. The boat sailed leisurely, and he didn't know how much later and how many planes of Earth Count's horns they had passed before they came to a stop. There was no heart-palpitating hell in that piece of land, just a cluster of majestic palaces. The small boat descended and stopped in front of them. The palace hall had a name in the language of Yudu, and Qin Mu looked over. He instantly knew the meaning of the words there, "Manor of benevolent saintly king equal to heaven." The messenger entered the hall and said, "This is my manor. Your body is too small so Earth Count can't meet you directly. Wait for a moment. Earth Count's clone will come and question you." Qin Mu checked the murals in the manor while waiting. They portrayed various myths and legends. Suddenly, magma flowed out from the center of the hall, and the floor became bubbling magma. It swirled, and a pair of twisted horns rose up, followed by the whole body of Earth Count that was over 30 yards tall. The messenger of death bowed and took out a book. "I've brought Qin Fengqing. All the evils he has done is recorded in this book. May Earth Count go through it." Qin Mu hurriedly came closer and saw that the book was terrifyingly thick. He hurriedly said, "I didn't do all of those things in the book. I'm just 18 years old. So how could I have done so many bad things?" The magma Earth Count took the book and flipped through it to check. Divine lights blazed in his eyes as he said, "The things recorded here are not the things you have done in the world of the living, but in Yudu. Is the jade pendant I made for you still around? I could feel the seal loosening recently." Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 562, Unable to Guard Against. Qin Mu's eyes opened wide in disbelief, and his heart trembled. His jade pendant had actually been crafted by Earth Count? His jade pendant should have belonged to Qin family, and he had worn it ever since he was young. So how could it have been crafted by Earth Count? What was the relationship between them? Was it because he had truly done so much evil that Earth Count sealed him with the jade pendant? However, he should have only been a baby, so how could he have committed evil? He didn't have any memory of that. And besides, in eternal peace and supreme Emperor Heaven, who didn't know that Cult Master Qin was a noble, benevolent, and a broad-minded character? So how could he have committed evil before? The seal should have become loose. The magma Earth Count continued to flip through the book. There was once a few gods and devils who tried to break the seal, but they didn't succeed. However, the seal seems to have gotten loose and almost released you. It's fine. I'll reinforce it later. His browsing speed was extremely fast, and he quickly read through all of the evils Qin Mu had committed. When he came to the last page, he said, "In the ominous land of Supreme Emperor Heaven, son of Qin family Qin Fengqing used Soul Guide to disrupt Yudu, seizing 48,000 souls by force, injuring the messenger of death. Using Soul Guide to bring away the 48,000 souls was indeed my doing, but injuring the messenger of death wasn't. It was 7 kills Star Sovereign Wei Liao who did it, so find him if you want." The magma Earth Count turned his head to look at Elder Messenger of Death and asked, "Was it 7 kills Star Sovereign Wei Liao who injured the messenger of death?" There was 7 kills Star Sovereign Wei Liao's name in Life and Death book, but after he died and his soul scattered 20,000 years ago, it was removed. so he is no longer in Yudu's jurisdiction. The reason why the 48,000 souls escaped though was still mainly because of Qin Fengqing helping 7 Kills Star Sovereign retrieve his soul and patch it back together. Because of that, the debt of injuring the Messenger of Death has to be recorded in Qin Fengqing's book. After all, he's still alive and his name is still in the Life and Death book. The elder Messenger of Death, who was a clone of benevolent saintly king equal to heaven, replied. The Magma Earth Count looked at Qin Mu and said, "Do you accept for this debt to be recorded under your name?" "I don't," Qin Mu said instantly. "Record it under his name," the Magma Earth Count told Elder Messenger of Death. "Settle it in the future." Qin Mu's face instantly turned black. "If you're going to record it under my name, why even bother asking me?" However, when Earth Count said to settle the debt in the future, hope lit up in his heart. His words meant that Earth Count really only wanted to talk to him about the cause and effect of his actions and not seek reparations. The Magma Earth Count closed the thick book and lowered his head to look at the tiny Qin Mu below him. "Why did you disrupt the order of Yudu and summon those souls into the world of the living? Did you remember something? Are there images of Yudu flashing in your mind?" Qin Mu stared blankly for a moment, then shook his head. "When I was sent exiled out of Yudu, I should have only been 1 or 2 months old, right? How could I have images of Yudu flashing in my mind? As for summoning the souls in the ominous land, I had no choice but to do so." He told them about the reason why he had executed Soul Guide, then stood still, waiting for his punishment quietly. The Magma Earth Count kept staring at him. After a moment, he asked, "Are there really no images flashing in your mind? You don't recall anything?" Qin Mu shook his head. "What could I recall?" he asked with a smile. "If you didn't recall anything, how did you become proficient in Yudu language?" The Magma Earth Count kept staring at him like he could see through him. In a while, he said in a slower voice, "Proficiency in Yudu language allows you to cultivate the paths, skills, and divine arts of Yudu, to open the door to the divine treasures of the Devil Path. Aren't you curious about how you were able to open the divine treasures of the Devil Path? Devils are descendants of the devil gods in Yudu, so they can open up their divine treasures of the Devil Path. Aren't you curious about how you are also able to do so?" Elder Messenger of Death asked from beside him. "I am." Qin Mu looked at him with curiosity. "How was I able to open up the divine treasures of the Devil Path as well as divine treasures of the God Path?" "That's because you are the descendant of Carefree Village and also a life form born in Yudu." Just as Elder Messenger of Death said that, the Magma Earth Count intercepted him. "He doesn't need to know all of that, and we don't need to explain it to him. He was summoned to be questioned, not to worm out facts from us." That Elder Messenger of Death came to realization and said with a smile, "He managed to worm a fact out of me. This brat's expression is simply abominable. He made me fall for his tricks." Qin Mu blushed and said with embarrassment, "My curiosity was piqued by official sovereign, so I just asked that. I wasn't trying to worm facts out from the two of you. I'm just a small child that turned 18. Elder Messenger of Death shook his head. "Really can't see that he's lying." The Magma Earth Count nodded and said, "This is an acquired slyness. He learned it from the living people. It wasn't part of his nature, but training changed that. In that case, how much of what he said is true and how much is fake?" The Magma Earth Count knew Qin Mu inside out, so he said, "When he talked about the cause of bringing back the souls to the ominous land, every word was true. After that, he might have seemed to have said a lot, but he didn't say anything at all. Instead, he was trying to ask and worm facts out of us." Elder Messenger of Death thought it over in detail and realized that it was truly so. "My nature isn't like this. I was just taught some bad stuff by the elders in my village, which is why I turned out this way. I really don't have any flashbacks of Yudu." "This sentence is true," the Magma Earth Count said. "The seal is still there, so it should be just the memory regarding language that has awoken. He doesn't recall anything of what he had experienced." With sweat pouring down his forehead, Qin Mu probed, "I have killed some people in the past. Will that make my sins heavier?" "This sentence is fake. He's fishing for facts, the magma earth count said. However, what he wants to ask isn't a secret, so you may reply to him. All kinds of evil committed before death will be viewed as equal after death. Yudu is not a place of judgment, but where death belongs. Unless people are guilty of terrible crimes or disrupting the order of Yudu, they won't be eaten by earth count. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief, but Elder Messenger of Death wasn't finished yet. Those who are guilty of terrible crimes are plagued by sin and have to be burned by karma fire, which is incredibly painful. Earth count eats them to absorb their sins and karma fire. People like you who disrupt the order of Yudu and don't let dead people remain dead are also eaten by earth count. Qin Mu became nervous again. Elder Messenger of Death looked at his face, then revealed a satisfied expression. However, Yudu doesn't dabble in the affairs of the living world. You're still alive, so we can't deal with you and need to wait until you die. Official Sovereign, you got tricked by his expression again, said the magma earth count. Stunned, Elder Messenger of Death cried out. His original intention was to ask me if he would be punished right now? It's truly impossible to guard against high. The magma earth count nodded. Then his gaze landed on Qin Mu's face once again. He said, "Don't speak first. Let me ask him." Qin Mu stood silent. The magma earth count looked at his obedient expression and pondered over it. He then decided not to say anything and just raised his finger gently. The jade pendant on Qin Mu's neck slowly floated up and came to rest onto his palm. The magma earth count plucked down one of the long horns on his head and stabbed it into the jade pendant. The entire long horn sunk inside and vanished without a trace. Rings of fire spread out from the jade pendant before gradually dispersing. The jade pendant flew up and went back to rest around Qin Mu's neck. He hid it beneath his shirt, keeping it close to himself. The magma earth count waved his hand and said, "I wanted to see the seal of the jade pendant. Since it's been stabilized, send him back. We'll talk about everything after he dies." Elder Messenger of Death hurriedly said, "After he dies, won't he still?" The magma earth count shot him a glance, and earth count suddenly remembered being ordered not to talk. He hurriedly kept the rest of the sentence to himself. The body of magma earth count swirled, and his voice came from the magma. "Don't let anyone touch your jade pendant. Official Sovereign, when you send him off, don't talk to him. Earth count, I want to meet my mother. Is that possible?" Qin Mu asked in a hurry. The magma earth count vanished. Qin Mu stood with a blank look on his face. After a moment, he said, "I just want to meet my mother. I've never seen her before. Official Sovereign, do you know how she looks like?" Elder Messenger of Death pondered over it and nodded. Qin Mu looked at him with eyes filled with anticipation. Elder Messenger of Death was truly troubled, and he hesitated for a moment. "Earth Count has ordered me to not speak to you. Official Sovereign, is my mother still alive?" he asked with excitement. The Messenger of Death hesitated for a moment. Qin Mu's expression really gripped at his heart, so he could only nod at him. "Stop asking things. I'm very troubled. I have already gone against Earth Count's orders by talking to you. Go, it's not yet daytime in Supreme Emperor Heaven. I'll send you back to the world of the living." Qin Mu could only follow him and board the small boat. He was silent on the way. The small boat sailed leisurely. They left the broken plane on Earth Count's horns and went into the darkness. The true body of Earth Count was incomparably huge. Qin Mu didn't know how tall or large it was, but the small boat required a lot of time to leave the 29 Ben's Yellow Springs. Elder Messenger of Death kept looking around. From time to time, he would raise the lantern to shine it around them. In a bit, he threw a yellow talisman to Qin Mu and said, "The fellows looking for you will not give up this chance. Stick this yellow talisman on your face, and no gods or devils will be able to see your face. Whatever they glimpse would be fake, just like how I look like now." Qin Mu stuck the yellow talisman onto his face and didn't move. "Why haven't you made any holes yet?" Elder Messenger of Death asked curiously. Dispirited, Qin Mu said resentfully, "Not interested. Little child throwing a tantrum." At that moment, the small boat stopped. Elder Messenger of Death quickly stood up and raised his lantern while saying indifferently, "Are you still not giving up? May official sovereign give us a way out," a voice said from the darkness, but it was a cacophony of many having fused into one. "We just need his face and identity in the world of the living. We don't want his life now. You guys are meddling too much. Retreat quickly, or if my true body descends, you guys can forget about even being ghosts," Elder Messenger of Death said coldly. On the boat, Qin Mu secretly took out the life and death book he had taken from shaman god Kuei and shown it into the darkness. His body couldn't help shuddering when a name appeared on the page. "He, you still gave the game away." The weird voice from the darkness moved away rapidly. Elder Messenger of Death turned his head back, and his gaze landed on the life and death book in Qin Mu's hands. He sighed and said, "Now you know his true identity, but he also knows your true identity. What you used is the life and death book of the celestial heavens, and there aren't many of them around. He will find you soon. You, take care of yourself." For a moment, Qin Mu was stunned. Only then did he realize what the game had been. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 563 Dark History. Qin Mu's life and death book had been taken from shaman god Kuei, and those who knew that it was in his hands were Xing and Pangong Tso, as well as the demon monks of Thunderclap Monastery. Shaman god Kuei should have been the heavenly official or earthly official, a god that managed souls. It was unlikely that he had made it himself, but that it had been gifted to him. There was little doubt that celestial heavens wouldn't have many such treasures, and each one would have an owner. Because of that, Elder Messenger of Death was certain that Qin Mu would be tracked rather quickly. Tracking the whereabouts of life and death book was much simpler than tracking Qin Mu. The name that appeared on the life and death book just now was Zhu Huang. Qin Mu flipped the yellow talisman up and revealed half of his face. What god is Zhu Huang? He's a god in the Yellow Springs. After he inhales or exhales, floods rise in the worlds and reap the souls there. He is one of the 4 great commanders that the celestial heavens have stationed in Yudu, Elder Messenger of Death said. He's not the only one looking for you, though. There are 3 other great commanders. Shen Ming, who manages the souls, Han Lei, who manages fate, and Lu Li, who manages the prison. You shouldn't have taken out the life and death book. With it, it won't be hard for them to track you down. Qin Mu grew solemn. After a moment, he frowned and spoke in a troubled voice. If I give the life and death book to Grandmaster or Xing, pushing everything on them, I should remain unknown. Elder Messenger of Death looked at him. You're just 18 years old, so you can only sabotage youths of your age. The 2 people you mentioned are not suitable. Besides, after the 4 great commanders reap the soul of whoever you'd chosen to throw at them, they would discover your ruse, so it's not as simple to sabotage others as you think. Bah! Why am I helping you look for crooked ideas? Qin Mu released the yellow talisman, and it covered his face once more. He said while blushing, "A just cause attracts much support, while an unjust one finds little. Official sovereign must have found me honest, which is why you shared your wisdom. Since we can't sabotage, can the 4 gods leave Yudu and enter Supreme Emperor Heaven or Eternal Peace?" The small boat sailed leisurely towards Supreme Emperor Heaven. Elder Messenger of Death placed his lantern on the pole and sat down. Their abilities are too powerful, so it's not easy for them to enter other worlds. However, they will find a way to capture you. Once you cultivate to life and death realm and open the divine treasure, they could enter through there after locating you. Qin Mu shuddered. Entering from his life and death divine treasure? Wouldn't all the divine arts practitioners of life and death realm be in extreme danger? However, Yudu has its own rules. Entering a life and death divine treasure to seize another's life is against Yudu's rules, so they won't be able to do it easily. Elder Messenger of Death had already shared a lot of information, so he felt like he might as well say everything. However, even though their true body can't leave, they can send their disciples to Supreme Emperor Heaven or Eternal Peace, or they could find other people to act as their hands to kill you. Or when Supreme Emperor Heaven gets sacrificed by the devils to connect their world to Eternal Peace, the world barrier will cease to exist. At that time, They'll be able to enter eternal peace at leisure. Qin Mu relaxed and said with a smile, "It's not easy to kill me, and it's also not easy to attack Supreme Emperor Heaven. It has told through 20,000 years, and now with the backing of Eternal Peace Empire and endless reinforcements, it'll be easy to last another 20,000 years." Elder Messenger of Death sneered at him. "You underestimate the devils. It's hard to say how long Supreme Emperor Heaven will last. We're here, you can take off the yellow talisman and return." Qin Mu looked over in a hurry and saw that they were already in the battlefield from before. It seemed that they were exactly from where he had been taken, and so he just jumped out of the boat. "Return me my yellow talisman," Elder Messenger of Death shouted. Qin Mu fled with the yellow talisman on his face as though he was a thief that got discovered. "Damn it!" As Elder Messenger of Death saw him slipping away, he couldn't help seething with rage. He was about to give chase, but he suddenly stopped and burst out laughing. "It's just a yellow talisman. I shall gift it to him so he doesn't cause any trouble." The small boat turned back and vanished into the darkness. Qin Mu covered over 10 miles before daring to look back. Only when he saw that Elder Messenger of Death really didn't give chase that he let out a sigh of relief. He plucked the yellow talisman from his face and examined it before putting it away. "This yellow talisman is a good thing. Even gods and devils wouldn't be able to recognize me if I stick it on my face. At least I've gotten some good things from this trip to Yudu." He raised his head up and was slightly stunned. He saw flying ships sailing toward Li City, and they were only several hundred miles away from him. The pill furnaces of the flying ship spewed out intense light for them to remain airborne. "I've left Supreme Emperor Heaven for quite a long time, some 6 hours at least, so how did the flying ships only cover several hundred miles? According to their speed, it should have been thousands of miles. It looks as if only 15 minutes have passed." Qin Mu sprinted with all his strength to catch up. First, he caught up with the army traveling on land, and not long later he caught up to the fleet of the flying ships. He came to the main ship. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and the Black Tiger God were looking at each other in horror, and so were everyone else in the surroundings. They were still discussing how Qin Mu had been invited into Yudu by the Messenger of Death, and what would happen next. Qin Mu chose that moment to ran out from behind them. "I'm back. How long have I been away?" he asked with a smile. "And not even an hour." Xianxia stuttered in astonishment. "You were taken by the Messenger of Death and returned from Yudu already?" The Messenger of Death was the official sovereign of Yudu. He even brought me to another world and found a strong practitioner of divine bridge realm named Hanjin. He said he would reap his soul after 3 days. He then brought me to Earth Count and talked about the cause and effect of my actions. Earth Count said he would deal with me after I die, then shooed me back. On the way, we also met some gods and devils who wanted to take me. Qin Mu shared everything, finding it quite weird as well to have done so many things in such a short while. It would have taken 3 to 5 days in the world of living to accomplish all that. It was much shorter in Yudu, and even less time had passed in the world of the living in the meantime. Yudu is like a dream. Your trip to Yudu is equivalent to a dream. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's eyes flashed, and he said, "As long as you returned alive, it doesn't matter. Is Earth Count very scary?" Qin Mu shook his head. "Earth Count is easy to talk to. It's the same for the Messenger of Death." Everyone's faces grew weird. Earth Count and the Messenger of Death were easy to talk to? Only Qin Mu could say something like that. Anyone, no matter if they were gods or devils, would change their act when talking about Earth Count. They were even more tight-lipped about the Messengers of Death. "Maha!" The young dragon on Qin Yu's body quickly slithered down and ran to Qin Mu to rub against him. Feeling somewhat resentful, Qin Yu thought to himself, "I haven't even felt its warmth yet, and it's lured away by him again." Qin Mu caressed the little dragon and moved it to his ear. Its head hung down while its dragon's whiskers swayed in the air. Jealousy took root in Qin Yu's heart. "Junior brother Qin, lend me your little dragon for a period of time. I might even need to bring him to great ruins. I will return him to you after I come back, and you will definitely be surprised," Qin Mu said with a smile. I was captured by Fu Riluo and struggled for my life. After going to Yudu, I'm truly tired, so I shall take a rest first. Qin Yu looked at him bringing the little dragon away and thought to himself, I wonder if my little dragon will really be mine after a few days? Its soul was already lured away by him. Elder Messenger of Death returned to manner of benevolent saintly king equal to heaven and flipped open a thick book. It was the book he had handed to the Magma Earth Count. Qin Mu had wanted to read it as well, but Magma Earth Count was too tall. He also needed to act obediently, so he didn't get to see the contents of the book. Elder Messenger of Death turned the first page and saw flowing pictures. There was a piece of dark land on which a pregnant woman was giving birth. Boundless devil chi and grievances of the broken souls flowed furiously toward the small delivery room. That place seemed to contain a terrifying devil king that was swallowing the evil devil nature and devil chi of Yudu like a whale. Meanwhile, outside that piece of land, countless devil gods were alarmed and hid in the darkness, looking nervously at the first life form that was born from the womb in the history of Yudu. The descent of the Son of God, a devil god said in the corner of the page. In the sky above the delivery room, scarlet red eyes opened. There was 1, 2, no 3 of them. Elder Messenger of Death flipped to the second page, and the picture changed. A big fat boy jumped down from the embrace of the woman, his three-eyed form catching the Messenger of Death's attention. The boy was wreaking havoc on a dark land, his two chubby fists holding tight the two devil gods that had come to assassinate him. His 3 eyes opened up, and 3 beams shot out. They scorched the land, burning numerous monsters into oblivion. All ghosts there, big and small, were fleeing for their lives. Even ghost kings didn't look back on their way out. Their malicious faces were filled with terror, creating a surreal sight. The baby brought the devil god to his mouth and bit off half a head. It was a bloody event. Elder Messenger of Death shook his head and continued to browse. The next page was about how after the baby had swallowed countless souls and ate 2 devil gods, he became ridiculously huge and terrified everyone who saw his ferocious appearance. He crushed numerous levels of hells, killing all of the devil gods that came after his mother and clansmen. He made them all piss their pants and flee for their lives. However, the baby seemed to contain incomparably evil thoughts in nature. It didn't matter to him if before him were devils who were chasing after them or ghosts who were simply residing in Yudu. He killed and ate all of them. Elder Messenger of Death saw panic and fear on the mother's face. She was looked afraid of her own son, his devil nature. Elder Messenger of Death flipped to the next page, and it was another picture of the baby slaughtering everyone. In the picture, he was standing on a huge devil dragon while slitting open its belly. His 3 eyes revealed a murderous glint. Yet at the end of the painting, when the baby finished eating, he changed back into a small form and asked his mother to carry him. Elder Messenger of Death flipped page after page, watching things that were harder and harder to see. The baby crushed waves and waves of devil gods chasing after them, and this massacre alarmed the big shots hiding in Yudu. They crusaded against the baby and fought with him until heaven fell and earth rent. Near the end of the book, the baby had relied on his evil nature and ruthlessness to become one of the powers in Yudu. One day, he came to the borders of Yudu and used his huge scarlet eyes to peep into the world of the living with an excited gaze. On the other side of the picture, the big shots of Yudu were talking about something to Earth Count. The mother was also there, appealing to the Lord. The Earth Count picked a broken piece of jade from the corner of his horn and refined it into a jade pendant. The mother held back her tears as he put down a seal on it. She then called her son over and put the jade pendant around his neck. The devil nature within him was suppressed along with his god nature. His body returned to normal, changing back into the most ordinary baby, a really tiny thing. He lay in his swaddling clothes and raised his arms and legs while crying "Aah." He then sucked his toe very seriously. The mother carried him up and gave him a few kisses before reluctantly putting him into a basket. Some woman picked it up and took a paper boat to leave into the distance. At the back, ghost kings, other ghosts of all sizes, as well as the devil gods that were faintly discernible beat drums and gongs to celebrate the baby's departure. Elder Messenger of Death flipped to the last page, which was of Qin Mu in the ominous land. With his long hair draped over his shoulders, he cast a spell with his sword raised and opened gate of heaven influence to summon the souls from the world of the dead. At that time, the jade pendant on his neck had floated up. 18 years. Elder Messenger of Death closed the book and hid it properly. He then exhaled deeply. It's completely impossible to see what this brat had been like before. I truly hope his devil nature will never awaken and control him again. Luckily Earth Count sealed and exiled him to the world of the living. Otherwise, what would Yudu have become by today? Yet if he'd been left in Yudu, he probably wouldn't have lived to 18 years old. He probably would have been eaten by Earth Count long ago for doing too much evil. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 564 Little Overlord of Yudu. There's still one suspicious point from Qin Fengqing's incident, and that is that Earth Count had already sealed him. By right, all of his divine treasures should have been sealed, so he wouldn't have been able to cultivate or even open his divine treasures, let alone become a divine arts practitioner. Elder Messenger of Death paced around while thinking about the matter. He could only live like a mortal till his body stopped functioning, which is for around 100 years at most. Yet how was he able to open his divine treasures? Earth Count had sealed Qin Mu's devil nature and his memory. His god nature was also sealed along with it. During the process, Earth Count's voice had formed a seal on Qin Mu's divine treasures. It was an accidental act, and the suppression was a side effect of sealing his god nature and devil nature. The seal hadn't been meant to be that terrifying, but it ended up cutting off his path of cultivation. This also meant that there was no god or devil nature in Qin Mu's body. All of his divine treasures, no matter whether they were god or devil, were sealed and could never be opened. It was thus impossible for him to cultivate and improve himself. After Qin Mu went to the world of the living, he should have led a life like a normal human being and spent his life ordinarily. Yet his divine treasures had opened. To make matters worse, he had also cultivated so fast that he had already opened 7 stars divine treasure and even merged 7 stars and 6 directions into one. At first, he'd opened the divine treasures of his divine path, while now the speed of his devil path cultivation was as though he had the assistance of a god. It was extremely strange. Opening spirit embryo divine treasure requires one to rely on their abilities. Nobody else could help even if they wanted to, so he could have only relied on himself. Yet the seal on his divine treasures was 100 times harder than those of an ordinary person. This was because if he tried to break the spirit embryo wall, he would activate Earth Count's seal, and the 9 heavens god language of Earth Count would come from above. And if he tried to open the spirit embryo divine treasure of the devil path, he would encounter Earth Count's Yudu devil language. Elder Messenger of Death couldn't think of an explanation no matter what. He wasn't omniscient and omnipotent, and he also couldn't return to the night when Qin Mu had consumed the blood of the 4 spirits. He didn't know that on that night, there had been an old man whose limbs were severed sitting beside the bonfire in disabled elderly village and speaking to the fiendish villagers around him. My guess is that Moore has another type of constitution, one that combines the strength of the 4 great constitutions and overlord body, he had said at that time. With that sentence, a legend had been born, turning the impossible possible. The villagers of disabled elderly village found even more blood of the 4 spirits, going all out for Qin Mu to consume as much as possible. The youth had also worked much harder as he had the belief of being invincible in his heart. He was the overlord body, the strongest spirit body. If he couldn't open his divine treasure, it would definitely be because he wasn't working hard enough and didn't deserve the title of overlord body. And like that, Earth Count's seal got thinner and thinner from his grind, and he learned the devil and god languages. He then used the instant when the god, devil, and Buddha languages crossed to break open his spirit embryo divine treasure. From then onwards, his future had become bright. Earth Count's seal was still there, and his devil and god nature were still sealed. However, the even stronger belief to grow that flooded out from the tiny body was something that Earth Count and the other big shots in Yudu would have never expected. The story of a legend had begun from a white lie by an elder who looked like a human rod and lay beside a bonfire that night. Besides that, there's also the weird incident from that time he was exiled out from Yudu and left in great ruins. What had happened back then? Elder Messenger of Death shut his eyes, then opened them after a long moment and took out Yudu's life and death book. What happened must be related. I should find that woman who had carried him away back and ask her about what happened. If she's still alive, I can locate her with life and death book. And if she has died, her soul should have returned to Yudu. He flipped through Yudu's life and death book, and his expression slowly became grim. The woman's name had already been removed from the life and death book. This meant that there were two possibilities. First, her soul might have scattered, just like that of 7 Kills Star Sovereign. When souls cease to exist, their names would automatically vanish from the life and death book. Second, her soul had landed in Fengdu or some other place that was similar to Yudu. What exactly did she experience? Elder Messenger of Death sighed and closed the life and death book. His body shook and he separated a number of himself out. They each got into a boat to leave. Now the little overlord of Yudu is much cuter than in the past. I like this brat called Qin Mu more and don't want to see Qin Fengqing again. However, the seal has already become loose once, and Celestial Heavens is also looking for him. If the seal breaks in the future and Qin Mu turns back into Qin Fengqing, I'm afraid Yudu will be in danger. In Li City, Qin Mu opened his eyes in a daze, his face damp. Qin Yu's little dragon was lying on his face and licking his cheek. Qin Mu pinched the tail of the little thing and lifted him up. The small dragon raised his head and climbed onto his arms. It went up his shoulders and hung himself down from his ear. Qin Mu took a pail of water to wash his face, and the little dragon also took the chance to bury his face in the water. It sucked in a mouthful and spat it out to play around. Qin Mu walked out of the cabin and stretched his back. He had been sleeping on the ship the whole night. Hu Linger, Ling Yuxiu, Si Yunxiang, and Sanghua had woken up early and were cooking. Upon seeing him awake, they greeted him. The chest clattered over and rubbed against Qin Mu's legs. It opened up and showed him the bones it had collected. The dragon Qilin bit onto a huge basin and walked over. He wagged his tail and placed the basin at Qin Mu's feet. Fatty dragon, haven't you hid a few furnaces of spirit pills in the chest? Qin Mu took out an apron and went to help the girls cook. He said with a smile, "Let me do it. Cult Master even knows how to cook?" Sanghua asked with astonishment. Cult Master is an expert in cooking. The dishes he makes are delicious. During the days when Princess Xiu and I were seized by Grandpa Blind to marry him, it was Cult Master who did all the cooking. I even got addicted to his food and wanted to marry him for real. Si Yuanxing explained in an excited voice. Ling Yuxiu's eyes lit up. I was also addicted and even hoped Grandpa Blind could try to force us to marry once more. Let's just wait for Cowherd to send up the delicacies. Qin Mu received the ladle, and his heart moved slightly, turning his vital qi into fire. He said with a smile, "Actually, Grandpa Mute in our village cooks the best dishes. Grandpa Apothecary's medicinal cuisine tastes the most delicious, while Grandpa Ma is a master of vegetarian dishes. Granny C also cooks well, but no one dares to eat them, since we don't know what kind of ingredients she uses. The others can't really cook." The dragon Qilin looked at the chest, and it showed him its collections of bones, seemingly very happy. It then threw 2 bones at him. The dragon Qilin rummaged through the chest's insides until he found some spirit pills. The black tiger god walked over, his voice booming like thunder. "Fatty dragon, stop eating. I shall bring you to train. The best time to train is right after waking up in the morning. You taught me many things, so I'm going to teach you as well. I shall help you get rid of the excess flab on your body. Junior brother, I'm going to borrow your fatty. Senior brother, feel free," Qin Mu hurriedly said. The dragon Qilin tried to finish all of the spirit pills in his basin in one swallow, but before he could get all of them inside his mouth, the black tiger god grabbed his tail and dragged him away. "My bowl!" The dragon Qilin's cries rang loud in the air. "I haven't even licked it clean. Little fox, come over after you finish your breakfast and train with me. I shall bring you guys to attack the enemy camp," the black tiger shouted from afar. Hu Linger acknowledged, and the black tiger dragged the dragon Qilin by his tail. Qin Mu finished cooking and took off his apron. He sat down with the girls in front of the dining table while Hu Linger scooped porridge for them before sitting down as well. The small dragon on Qin Mu's ear secretly stretched out its claws and quickly grabbed a piece of stir-fried clam meat before retreating. It hugged the meat and started eating. Everyone ate and chatted. Ling Yuxiu and Si Yunxiang had also went to Fengdu before and learned some techniques and divine arts from the gods and devils there. However, the techniques and divine arts they cultivated weren't complete, and the gods and devils of Fengdu could only teach. They still had to comprehend them by themselves. However, Supreme Emperor Heaven's inheritances are complete, and we've learned quite a number of good things during these few days that we were here. With Imperial Preceptor keeping the battle line, there won't be any huge battles after this victory for the time being. We can take this chance to learn from senior sisters and brothers of Supreme Emperor Heaven before exchanging blows with senior brothers and sisters of the devil race. There is quite a number of disciples from our heavenly devil cult that have come here. Sister Xianxia had also said she wanted to go to Heavenly Saint Academy to learn for a period of time. Si Yunxiang said. Qin Mu pondered it for a moment. We might be able to establish a branch of Heavenly Saint Academy here and invite famous gods, devils, and divine bride realm practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven to give lectures. The people of Supreme Emperor Heaven could also go to Heavenly Saint Academy to cultivate for a period of time. This way we could interact frequently and not hold up the situation of the battle. They ate and chatted around the dining table. After Hu Linger finished eating, she rushed out to train with the Black Tiger God and the Dragon Qilin. Qin Mu and the girls stayed back to wash the dishes. When Yuhi boarded the ship, he couldn't help becoming astonished when she saw Qin Mu washing the dishes. With a strange expression, she said hesitantly, "Cult Master, some devil scouts are lingering around in the battlefield. I'd like to bring Xianxia and the rest for guerrilla warfare and meet them." Qin Mu nodded and said with a smile, "You guys go ahead. I shall do the dishes." Si Yunxiang immediately ran off after pulling Ling Yuxiu and Xianxia along with her. From afar, Yuhi's voice came in a whisper. "Isn't it improper to let Cult Master wash the dishes? How can he do such trivial matter as a Cult Master?" Si Yunxiang smiled at her. "Our Heavenly Saint cult is impudent like this. We don't have that many rules." Yuhi relaxed and said with a smile, "Cult Master once said that our Heavenly Saint cult is outstanding in the righteous path, and upon seeing his action as he serves as a role model, I finally understand that it isn't by chance that our Heavenly Saint is outstanding in the righteous path." This? Si Yunxiang stared wide-eyed, not knowing what she should say. Qin Mu finished cleaning up, and the chest clattered over to him again. It opened up and showed the bones it had collected. Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He took out some spirit weapons of the devil race and placed them inside it. "During this trip out, I killed numerous devil experts and took their spirit weapons. You should start collecting them instead of just always focusing on bones." The chest threw out the spirit weapons, choosing to continue to collect bones. Qin Mu shook his head and took out the true dragon's nest. He plucked out the little dragon from his ear and said with a smile, "Little Dao friend, you've been pestering me because the item you want to see is this." The eyes of the little dragon lit up, and he cried out "Maha Maha" without stopping. Qin Mu laughed and brought the little dragon into the true dragon's nest. The human and dragon landed inside, and Qin Mu let go of the small creature. The little dragon immediately flew round and round the nest, ineffably excited. Qin Mu took out Emperor's disc and threw it into the sky. The Emperor's disc changed into the true Dragon Lord and became compatible with the nest. Instantly, a vast and boundless dragon chi spread out, and countless writings of the dragon race appeared. That little dragon flew to and fro to read all of them. His Maha Maha cries turned into cryptic dragon language that was hard to understand. He was comprehending the writings on the true dragon's nest. The bloodline of the little dragon was very pure since he was the son of Surging River Dragon King. Qin Mu called him Little Dao Friend, but his actual age was actually over 20,000 years. It was just that he had been frozen in the dragon bead by Surging River Dragon King that he could never grow. The dragon language from his mouth became more and more cryptic. He was the son of the Dragon King, and his bloodline was even higher than that of Bai Qingfu and Bai Chuer that Qin Mu had met 40,000 years ago, when he had traveled back in time to High Emperor era. While listening, he could decipher more and more of the dragon language. Qin Mu just stood and listened to the dragon roars while mobilizing his vital qi to check the true dragon technique he had learned previously. His comprehension naturally became better and better as well. The little dragon flew up and down many times. It was hard to say how long had passed when he finally deciphered all of the writings. He then suddenly landed on the ground, and his body trembled, changing into that of a youth. He had a handsome appearance and majestic bearing. He looked slightly similar to Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 565 Qin Mu in the Mirror. Qin Mu brought little dragon Jiang Miao out through Spirit Energy Mutual Shift Bridge and looked around. He couldn't help the astonishment that welled up in him. Great Ruin's Spirit Energy Mutual Shift Bridge was right in the center of it, and there was 2 stone-paved road that was 100 yards each on both sides of the sacrificial altar. Meanwhile, surrounding Spirit Energy Mutual Shift Bridge were ancient temples, shrines, and divine palaces like a city that was twice larger than Border Dragon City. People came and went, making the place quite bustling. The temples and ruins had all been moved from elsewhere in Great Ruins to defend against the darkness. There were also numerous stone statues being worshipped with endless streams of incense. Many villages had settled in the city and no longer had to struggle for their lives daily. They became merchants which connected Middle Earth and West Earth. A primary school and a college had been also established to teach techniques and divine arts. It was just that they didn't have any sacred ground like the 4 great academies or Imperial College. There were also huge ruins outside the city for the strange beasts nearby to hide from the darkness. It was all very thoughtful. In this city, new and old constructions were in a picturesque disorder, setting each other off nicely. Qin Mu only took a rough look, and he could already tell that the person that planned the city was of rather high culture, self-cultivation, and had talent in city planning. His admiration for beauty had also reached extremely high attainments. New branches from an old tree, creating contrast between the old and new. It's indeed not bad. It might be because I've seen too many crooked constructions in Supreme Emperor Heaven that I feel so much more at home in Great Ruins. The chest ran out from Spirit Energy Mutual Shift Bridge behind him, and Qin Mu shook his head. The chest kept sticking to him. Since the dragon Qilin and Hu Linger had been brought to the battlefield for training, it followed him without sparing any effort. Cult Master, I feel the call of the divine dragon again, Jiang Miao said after looking around. Follow me. He shook his body and transformed into a little dragon. He flew out of the city, and Qin Mu brought the chest to chase after him, going into the depths of Great Ruins. Even though Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had finished the construction of the 2 roads which linked West Earth, Great Ruins, and Eternal Peace, there were still endless vast lands with few people around. Those places were all very mysterious. Qin Mu followed Jiang Miao to deeper into Great Ruins. They flipped through mountains and rivers, walking across pieces of ancient ruins. When night came, he let Jiang Miao lay on the chest while he walked through the darkness. The chest followed close behind him. Great Ruins in the darkness was completely different from Great Ruins in the day. When Qin Mu walked by himself through it, he could see Supreme Emperor Heaven that had become the darkness and numerous devils moving unpredictably. They would move along with them continuously or jump onto trees from time to time. Sometimes they would hide behind rocks and observe them secretly, not daring to get close. These devils aren't Supreme Emperor Heaven's devils. The Dark Realms in Great Ruins aren't only Supreme Emperor Heaven. Qin Mu was astonished. He had originally thought that the devils in the darkness of Great Ruins were from Supreme Emperor Heaven and that he had unraveled the whole mystery. Yet, from the looks of it, the devils around him had nothing to do with Supreme Emperor Heaven. That was because when the people of Supreme Emperor Heaven saw Great Ruins in the darkness, all they could see were blurry shadows. Back then, Xianxia had seen Qin Mu as a boy made of darkness, and once the time was up, he scattered like black sand. While in the darkness of Great Ruins, Qin Mu saw the people of Supreme Emperor Heaven the same way. They were from 2 different worlds, and they couldn't touch each other or interact in any way. Yet the monsters in the darkness of Great Ruins were different, They had truly existed in the darkness of great ruins. There are just so many secrets in great ruins. Qin Mu sighed, and Zhang Miao pointed out the direction for him. They continued to head forward. 2 days later, they came to the northwest side of great ruins as the sun rose as usual. Qin Mu swept his gaze around and said with a smile, "This place isn't too far from Permitha, Arkansas. I once drove moon ship through here. Look, here's its footprint." The huge imprint had already become a small lake, and there were even some weird fish swimming inside. Qin Yu and he bowed in gratitude. "Much thanks to Cult Master Qin for bestowing the technique and assistance for me to awaken my intelligence." Qin Mu returned the greeting and said with a smile, "I lent you a hand to learn the technique of the true dragon's nest, so there's no need to thank me. May I ask how I should address little Dao friend? My family uses Zhang as a surname, and my mother bestowed the name Miao on me, so I'm called Zhang Miao," he answered. "Even though I have deciphered the writings on the true dragon's nest once, I'm still a second generation and my bloodline isn't pure enough. We'll need a divine dragon to decipher it for us to gain the complete true dragon lord's technique." Qin Mu frowned. "There's no true dragon in Supreme Emperor Heaven that has become God. Where can we find a divine dragon?" "There's a divine dragon in great ruins. While following Qin Yu, I heard his calls from time to time." Qin Mu's spirit was greatly aroused, and he said with a smile, "In that case, let's head to great ruins." In the broken Permitha Arc in great ruins, huge chunks of land floated in a large seal. Suddenly, a long roar sounded out as a divine bridge broke through the air. Xing En's primordial spirit crossed it and soared to the celestial palaces on the other shore. "I'm out." Xing En retrieved his primordial spirit and rose up. He shouted sternly, "You mute! Come here! You've been meddling with me time and time again. Now that I have crossed the divine bridge, come out and die. Die, die, die." His echo rang back. The mute had long fled. Xing En's face turned black, and he rushed out in wide strides. At this moment his body trembled slightly. In his life and death divine treasure, Lu Li's devil eye appeared once more, and her sinister voice rang out. "The person you're looking for has a life and death book that once belonged to shaman god Kuei. Find that person." Lu Li's devil eye vanished. Xing En stood motionless in the air with a dumbfounded gaze. "Great physician Qin, so it's you?" Xing En was dispirited, and his heart was flustered. "So it was you. I've trusted you time and time again, and not once did I expect for you to be even worse than that mute. It's you. I would like to see what tricks can you play this time." Partner news. The call of the divine dragon is in the vicinity. Zhang Miao rose into the sky, then looked around and headed west. Qin Mu hurriedly caught up to him, and they came to a canyon. Suddenly, everything became silent. Not a sound could be heard. Qin Mu frowned and looked at their surroundings. He pulled back Zhang Miao, who was about to enter the canyon by following the call of the divine dragon, and said, "Keep calm. Don't get excited." Zhang Miao didn't understand what he meant. Qin Mu surveyed the surroundings, and his gaze landed on the footprints of Moon Ship. This is the place where Permitha Arc was sealed. Permitha Arc is a ship forged by Heavenly Works God race for emigration. They had wanted to use it to bring all the lives of their land as well as the gods and devils of founding Emperor era to Carefree Village. However, it crashed here because of an attack using brute force. The call of the divine dragon might not be real. This place shouldn't have even a single strange beast. When he'd used Moon Ship to pass this place, he had entered the overlapping space that sealed Permitha Arc nearby. The footprints left behind by Moon Ship vanished by where they were standing. Back then, he had faced numerous monsters and devil gods. They had pounced on Moon Ship furiously and many lost their lives. Yet when he returned to this place, he couldn't even see a bone. In front of the lakes of the canyon, sand covered the land. There was not a single rock to be found, not even the size of a fingernail. There were huge words covering the walls on both sides, but they weren't in human language. Instead of being squarish, they looked like complicated runes. Qin Mu didn't enter the canyon but stood outside while examining the runes on the wall. It's a kind of god writing used for sealing. He executed 10,000 spirit nature technique, and small whirlwinds rose in the canyon as he tried to raise a dune giant. However, the sand flowed and everything returned back to normal. Impossible! 10,000 spirit nature technique can enlighten all things, giving them spirit, so why couldn't it enlighten the sand and stone here? He squatted down and grabbed a handful of yellow sand. He suddenly grunted as he lifted his hand up with difficulty. Jiang Miao was puzzled and tried to lift a handful as well. Every grain of the yellow sand was incomparably heavy, equivalent to the weight of a mountain. Qin Mu splayed his fingers, and the fine sand trickled down. When they smashed against the ground, they gave off loud rumbles similar to thunder. This isn't sand, but spirit weapons. One grain of sand was left on Qin Mu's palm, and he blew on it with his vital qi. It instantly flew up and swirled, transforming into a sandstone with a radius of dozens of fields. When it flew in the sky, the sound of air breaking was deafening. When the vital qi from that breath of Qin Mu was finally exhausted, the sandstone shrunk and fell down as a grain of sand. Jiang Miao jumped in shock and looked at the yellow sand in the canyon. The grains of sand were too numerous to count, probably in the billions. If each grain was as huge as the one Qin Mu had brought up, how astonishing would their weight be? The god writings on both sides of the canyon are seals to hold the power of the sand in check. Once we go in, the seal and the formation will be activated. Qin Mu opened his divine eyes and looked at the sky. He suddenly let out a breath, and fog instantly spread through the sky. Rain started to fall slowly, yet it didn't reach the canyon. Instead, it got blocked by an invisible barrier. The rainwater formed cubes in the sky. The seals here are similar to the seal of Permitha, Arkansas. One cannot enter from the sky. He flew up and looked into the depths of the canyon, frowning slightly. The canyon was over 10 miles long, yet it suddenly vanished after that distance. It was as though it was cut off. The back of the canyon should be hidden. Qin Mu started to fret. If Grandpa Blind was here, he could try to solve this, but with my abilities, it'd be too difficult to deal with this god-level sealing and killing formation. It's very dangerous. Jiang Miao, let's return. We can't step in here. Jiang Miao revealed a disappointed look. However, his abilities were far inferior to those of Qin Mu. If even Qin Mu said they couldn't step in, he also couldn't do anything about it. Suddenly, Qin Mu was slightly stunned the next moment. In front of the lake, he saw space tear open, revealing a door. The sky and the earth were flipped open. The sky was still okay as one couldn't see any abnormalities if they didn't look closely. However, the earth kept trembling, and pieces of land appeared out of thin air, distancing themselves from the door. In an instant, they were 100 miles away. Next, Qin Mu saw a familiar figure walking out of the door. The moment it appeared, he instantly knew that things were bad and turned around to flee with Jiang Miao and the chest. But the sky and earth overlapped once again and brought them to the door. "Great Cult Master Qin," the familiar figure said in a familiar voice which had a hint of astonishment and delight. "What a small world. You even brought a dragon and my chest with you. Don't turn around. Keep your back to me." Qin Mu felt the murderous intent coming from the person behind him, and the smile of his face froze. "Senior brother Xing and has already found the source of the jade pendant, right? I didn't lie to you, did I? You didn't lie to me. I had indeed found numerous ruins with traces of the jade pendant." Xing and took out the mirror that Lu Li had handed to him. With his back against Qin Mu, he raised the mirror and said indifferently, "You weren't lying, but you had purposely lured me there and had a mischievous mute trap me there for half a year. If I hadn't become a god and made that mute know that he's in trouble, who knows how long I would have been trapped there. The life and death book is in your hands, right?" Qin Mu was frozen in place by his aura, but his heart trembled violently. Without changing his expression, he said, "Life and death book was seized by a youth. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I was actually not his opponent and he seized it by force." Xing An's gaze landed on the mirror where Qin Mu looked as usual. The next moment, though, the mirror image slowly turned its head around. The corners of Xing An's eyes twitched furiously. He saw the youth in the mirror change, and a devil eye filled with devil nature and desire for destruction appeared in Qin Mu's forehead. This devil eye was slowly opening while gripping his soul. Xingyan's hand trembled, and the mirror suddenly shattered. Xingyan hurriedly looked behind himself, but Qin Mu's back was still facing him. He hadn't turned around. However, the Qin Mu in the mirror had clearly looked back. His mind raced, and his aura wavered. Qin Mu took hold of this chance to grab the chest and the little dragon to rush into the canyon. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 566, 10 Miles Star Sand Calamity Formation. When Qin Mu brought the chest and Zhang Miao into the canyon, he saw the light flowing from the huge runes on both sides of the cliff. The next instant, all the sand in the entire canyon flew up as though a sandstorm was raising. "Don't breathe," Qin Mu shouted out. "Seal up all your pores." Zhang Miao instantly understood what was happening and held his breath while sealing up all of his pores. The sand in the canyon wasn't just yellow sand, but spirit weapons, and any grain of sand could expand any time to become a huge sandstone the size of dozens of fields. If they breathed in numerous grains of sands into their nasal cavity, throat, or lungs, the result would not be pretty. If a few grains of sand entered their pores and expanded outwards, it would also be extremely terrible for them. The instant before the violent sand reached them, Qin Mu poured vital qi into his sword pellet, and it instantly expanded. Flying swords flowed like water and transformed into a perfect metal sphere, hiding them within. Even the most exquisite sword skills would find it difficult to defend against the bombardment of the violent sand. He couldn't ensure that he would be able to block every grain of sand, so he might as well use his sword pellet to form the most perfect sphere to protect him. In Li City, he had already forged his flying swords into flowing water. Like Mute's sword pellets, it could transform into any form he wanted. For having refined a weapon to such a step, his forging method could be considered god-level. The moment Qin Mu hid inside the sword pellet, the violent sand arrived, and in an instant, small dents marred the sphere where numerous grains of sand had hit. The materials that Xianxia had given Qin Mu to forge his swords were of the highest quality. He might have been resentful about the resulting swords being too heavy earlier, which resulted in it being hard to execute, but now he was thankful that Xianxia had given him the best materials. It was the main reason why his sword pellet didn't shatter from the initial impact. Even so, the sword pellet was blown away and crashed around the canyon at a terrifying speed, bouncing here and there. Qin Mu and Zhang Miao's body shook violently inside, and they were in so much discomfort that they almost vomited blood. Even though they could avoid the flying sand in the sword pellet, the vibrations from collision almost tore them apart. Qin Mu used all he could to execute flowing water characteristic of the sword pellet to its limit. Every time a dent appeared, it would repair itself automatically. However, Qin Mu's vital qi would usually be shattered into pieces by the flying sand, so it was hard for him to execute the sword pellet. This resulted in more and more dents. This killing formation is even more terrifying than what I imagined. Despair filled Qin Mu's heart. When they had stepped into the canyon, Xingyan had followed right after. He had stretched his hand to grab the sword pellet when violent sand suddenly flew toward him. Xingyan's expression changed slightly, and his fingers trembled. His divine art burst forth to blow the sand back. "There's something wrong about this sand. Wait, they're spirit weapons and not really sand. My corporeal body is the body of a true god. So why should I be afraid of mere sand?" He immediately saw the clues and speculated the correct answer. Since he had already entered the god realm, he had rushed into the canyon to chase after Qin Mu's sword pellet. His abilities were much stronger than in the past, yet even so, it was still extremely difficult for him to advance through the valley. Every step was a challenge. Yellow sand flew everywhere, covering the land. It assaulted him from all directions. Xingyan's hands moved, and all kinds of divine arts came bursting forth to block the flying sand. Even though there were grains that he couldn't block, they could only cause pain to his corporeal body and not hurt him. Suddenly, he felt his feet becoming heavier and heavier. Noticing that some sand had fallen into his shoes, Xingyan stopped. He raised his feet to shake out the sand, but more and more sand landed on his body. The grains actually seemed to come alive and flow up his body. Cold sweat rolled down his forehead, and he used his strength to shake off the yellow sand off himself. In the meantime, loud explosions rang out non-stop as Qin Mu's sword pellet got smashed around like a shooting star. It was filled with dents and seemed like it would shatter at any moment. Soon, Xingyan's legs sank into the yellow sand, and he found it even harder to break free. Yet Qin Mu's sword pellet was also crooked from the bombardment, making it hard for him to continue. If the brat wants to die, I don't have to die with him. I shall leave this place first. Human King Creation Technique. Xingyan gave a low shout, and his body suddenly shrunk into a speck of dust. Like this, he planned to escape the ill fate of being buried alive in the sand. His creation technique was from Pan Gongtso, who had cultivated great educational heavenly devil scriptures before. Xingyan's attainments in it far surpassed those of Pan Gongtso, and even those of Qin Mu, the heavenly devil cult master. The moment he shrunk his body, the grains of sand expanded rapidly, and Xingyan's expression went blank. He saw countless huge stones come flying toward him like planets. Big and small were relative terms. He had shrunk countless times, and so the sand had expanded countless times. The grains of sand became huge planets to crush him. He felt like he'd fallen into a vast galaxy which was incomparably terrifying and chaotic. This is a killing formation for true gods. This kind of transformation changed star sand into constellations, shifting the formation according to how I change. Xingyan gave a dull grunt when he was caught between two planet-sized star grains of sand. He almost coughed up blood. After the two planet-sized star grains of sand crashed into him, they separated, and another two grains came. They crashed into Xingyan, who didn't have the time to avoid. Boom, boom, boom. The collisions rang with loud noise, and Xingyan's face turned pale. He finally couldn't hold back, vomiting a mouthful of god blood. The star sand grains weren't actually stars but spirit weapons the size of dozens of fields. The force of the collisions wasn't too terrifying, but the speed at which they happened was simply astonishing. A series of them had severely injured Xingyan. He shouted and used all his energy to execute his divine art, blowing away the star sand. He suddenly roared, and water flooded from behind him like a huge river and lifted his body up. The river danced in the air and traveled rapidly between the star sand, avoiding the planets by a hairbreadth. Xingyan let out a sigh of relief, but at that moment, the grains of star sand became incomparably bright and burst forth with starlight. In the sky, the beams connected, and the tens of thousands of star sand grains combined to form an incomparably strange eye. Crap! Just as Xingyan thought that, a beam of light shot out from that evil eye formed by the countless stars and struck his body. The long river under his feet crumbled, and he fell back while vomiting blood. The power of the sand wasn't too great, but when the grains combined, they were extremely terrifying and had the ability to hurt him. And in the vast galaxy, countless star sand grains gathered and turned into eyes floating in the sky. Beams of starlight shot to and fro, attacking him from all directions. Those beams were starlight sword chi, which was incomparably sharp. Even if Xingyan's body was the corporeal body of a true god, it was still difficult for him to defend himself. I was lured into the formation, and now I can no longer leave it. Despair filled Xingyan's heart, and he hurriedly looked toward Qin Mu. The youth was also facing a similar situation once sword pellet had broken open. However, Qin Mu was using phantom illusion technique to transform into a shadow to avoid the strikes of the star sand and keep himself alive for the moment. As for the chest and the little dragon, he must have placed them into his Tao Tai sack. With all the star sand combining into star sand evil eyes, starlight sword chi encircled both of them. Xingyan tried his best to avoid the beams of light while thinking, "It's not a loss to have this brat die with me. Wait, that's not right. I have just become a god. So to die along with this brat would be a huge loss." On the other side, Qin Mu suddenly froze. He raised his head to look at a star sand evil eye and stayed still as if he had accepted his fate. He waited quietly for his end. Xingyan had strong cultivation, and his corporeal body was incomparably strong, so he could still endure. As long as he could find the transformation in algebra inside the star sand killing formation, he would have a chance to escape. Right then, Qin Mu's corporeal body suddenly returned back to normal. When he raised his hand to do a mudra, a huge star formation of great overarching heavenly stars lined up and collided with the starlight sword chi that was shooting at him. A strange thing happened then. The constellation of great overarching heavenly stars was lit up by the starlight sword chi, the stars that formed it becoming incomparably bright. With a hum, a thick beam of light shot out and shattered one of the star sand evil eyes. Xingyan was stunned. He had recognized Qin Mu's mudra. It was what Li Tianxing had executed against him, and it was called Great Overarching Heavenly Stars Palm Force. In the end, though, Li Tianxing had still died in the hands of Xingyan. Yet one couldn't deny that what he used was an extremely powerful divine art. However, Li Tianxing's cultivation had been lacking, which made it so he was not a match for Xingyan. Yet Qin Mu had now used the same divine art to block the starlight sword chi of the star sand evil eye. It was truly strange. In the distance, Qin Mu executed Great Overarching Heavenly Stars Force Field and struck out with Great Overarching Heavenly Stars Palm Force, crushing star sand evil eyes one by one. He walked toward the depths of the canyon as though he was out for a walk. Xingyan looked at him vanishing up ahead, then also tried to execute Great Overarching Heavenly Stars Palm Force, but he had only learned the creation techniques of great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures and not the complete thing. How could that brat solve this formation that can kill even gods? Doubt arose in his heart. After a long time, Qin Mu walked out of the canyon that was 10 miles long, leaving the yellow sand behind himself. He then released Zhao Miao and the chest from his Taotai sack. Zhang Miao turned his head back and saw star sand evil eye flying to and fro. Starlight sword chi flashed around them, and his heart shook from astonishment. He wondered how Qin Mu had walked out of that. Qin Mu examined his surroundings silently and saw yellow sand still flowing continuously in the sky. He walked forward some more and saw the source of it. There was a huge cauldron filled with the sand. The 10 miles of life-threatening danger originated from it. Behind it, though, there was a majestic palace with vermilion walls and glazed tiles with dragons and phoenixes carved on them. It looked extraordinary and sacred. On the eaves, there were 10 sculptures of divine beasts sitting, while at the front there was a person riding a crane. Strangely, though, chains stretched out from the palace into all directions, going deep into the cliffs of the canyon. The chains rattled from time to time despite looking very heavy. Zhang Miao became excited and said in a low voice, "I can hear the call of the divine dragon. His voice is coming from here. I can hear it even more clearly now." Qin Mu couldn't hear that voice, probably because he wasn't a dragon. Only those with the bloodline could hear the call. "Don't just go there," Qin Mu told him and walked toward the chains. He examined one carefully and raised his hand to brush it gently. Instantly, gorgeous rune markings lit up, and small sparks floated in the air where they scattered with the wind. He went to the side of the cliff and examined the runes there. They were god writings, yet the 10 miles of yellow sand was a devil formation used to refine a true god to death. What was even stranger was that the devil formation had been powered by god writings, and the usage of both of them was extremely exquisite. To act straightforwardly, to be free from nature, that's the meaning of path. That's why no matter if it's God or devil, why is it my business? Qin Mu's expression was unmoved, and he said, "Zhang Miao, this is the teaching of Heavenly Saint Cult. Stretch your hand out." Zhang Miao did as told, and Qin Mu used cinnabar to draw a rune on his palm that was almost the same as the god writing on the wall. Let's go in." Zhang Miao didn't understand what he had done, but hurriedly entered the palace anyway. In the hall, a divine dragon was heavily chained. The chains went right through his body to keep him locked in place. The divine dragon was incomparably tall, sturdy, and sacred-looking. His dragon chi and dragon aura would make people look up at him in awe. The divine dragon opened his eyes and looked at Qin Mu and Zhang Miao. He then suddenly opened his mouth to say in a rumbling voice, "My clansmen, you have finally arrived. Cult Master, let's quickly rescue this senior divine dragon." Zhang Miao said swiftly, Qin Mu shook his head. His gaze focused on the chained giant dragon, and he said in a gentle voice, "This senior divine dragon, there's something I can't figure out. Why were you chained here by the founding master of my heavenly saint cult?" Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 567, Big Senior Brother Capturing Dragon. The divine dragon was slightly stunned, and his pupils contracted continuously. He focused his gaze on Qin Mu. His eyes were very huge, and if Qin Mu came to his face and stood under his eyelid, he wouldn't be able to reach its top even with his hands stretched up high. It wasn't comfortable being stared at by the pair of dragon's eyes. They held awe that made people shudder without feeling cold and aroused respect and fear in the heart. Qin Mu seemed to not feel anything though and slowly walked forward. He examined the decorations in the hall, noting numerous murals, but most of them had been destroyed. Dragons liked to show off their achievements and usually carved their deeds into murals, decorating their palaces to be sumptuous and shining brilliantly in gold. In addition, numerous murals described their glorious achievements. It was truly pleasant for them emotionally and physically to live inside such places. Not to mention the destroyed murals, even the treasures in the palace were all pillaged. Any incense burner or screen, any jade couch, teapot, book, painting, chess box, or zither were all moved away. Qin Mu even saw the holes where luminous pearls had once been, and not only that, there were also numerous tiles missing from the floor. From their position, they had all been at the center of the hall. There should have been a beautiful picture there which represented the owner's wealth and status. They had been taken away though and revealed the stones below. It was very painful to look at such a sight. The stones, however, all had runes written all over them. Qin Mu examined them in detail but didn't touch. "So the person who tricked me is your patriarch?" the divine dragon asked with a hint of anger in his voice. "It's not my founding master. He's my big senior brother." Qin Mu searched around carefully, looking for a treasure or two that founding master might have left behind carelessly, but the cleanliness of the place left him helpless. Clearly, if his big senior brother had gone to open a bathhouse in eternal peace, his business would have boomed. The palace had been scrubbed so clean by founding master that there wasn't a single thing left worthy of being taken away. The only things left were founding master's cauldron with 10 miles of yellow sand and the huge palace, but that was impossible. The two treasures were used to suppress the divine dragon. I saw star sand gathering in star sand evil eyes in the 10 miles of yellow sand. The star arrangements and the connection between the starlight as well as the attributes and structure of the stars were the arrangements of the divine arts of my heavenly saint cult's great educational heavenly devil scriptures. Qin Mu searched for half a day but to no avail. At that time, he finally looked at the divine dragon and said, "Once I saw that, I came to a realization. I had learned 10 miles star sand calamity formation before, and it's hidden inside great educational heavenly devil scriptures. After comprehending that, even though the formation could kill a true god, it became quite simple for me, and I was able to walk out alive." He walked 2 rounds around the chained divine dragon while speaking. "However, I still didn't dare to be certain that the killing formation was left behind by Big Senior Brother, so after I walked out of the star sand calamity formation, I went to check the god markings on the wall and the devil writings on the chains." Jiang Miao followed his footsteps and walked 2 rounds around the divine dragon. He pondered over it and said, "So the words you said just now weren't targeted at me, nor were they your comprehension? The sentence was what I saw in the god and devil writings that Big Senior Brother left behind, and I was talking about the cultivation of his frame of mind." Qin Mu turned and sat in front of the divine dragon. He stopped in his footsteps and explained to him, "My Big Senior Brother is the founding master of Heavenly Saint Cult, and the cultivation of his frame of mind has reached very high attainments. Heavenly Saint Cult has the saying that one has to do 3 things to become saint: found a cult, gain merit, and put their ideas in writing. Big Senior Brother established a cult and put his ideas in writing, but he hadn't gained merit, so he couldn't be a saint and cultivate to the realm of Saint Woodcutter. Yet among all the cult masters, other than him, no one could achieve even 2 things of the 3, so it could only be him that suppressed the divine dragon. The other cult masters couldn't have done it." Jiang Miao also stopped walking and looked at him with puzzlement. "In that case, Why did your big senior brother want to suppress the divine dragon? We will have to ask Senior Divine Dragon about that. Qin Mu raised his head and looked up at the huge divine dragon. Even when he was chained up and all his divine arts and transformation were restricted, his huge body was enough to make them look up. Its whiskers hung down like clouds tinged with sunset hues floating around them. There was no way anyone could see any evil in such an extraordinary and martial existence. Qin Mu raised his head to ask, Big senior brother probably chained you here to gain merit to become a saint. In that case, what evil have you done for him to have to trap you here? Senior, please enlighten me. The divine dragon looked at him with a cold gaze, then suddenly grinned, revealing razor-sharp teeth. Such a clever child, so why do you wish to die? You are so smart, so why don't you know that you should act blind? Sometimes you can live longer only when you don't speak the truth and pretend to be dumb. Jiang Miao shuddered and raised his head. In that case, what's the motive behind Senior calling me? The divine dragon's body twisted, and his neck swept in a peculiar arc. The chains were pulled taut by him, but he looked into Jiang Miao's eyes. His long whiskers almost touched Qin Mu and Jiao Miao, but with the restraint of the chains, they were just out of reach. When Qin Mu had brought Jiang Miao to walk around the divine dragon, he had calculated the length of the chains, and his calculations were incomparably marvelous. They were just out of the giant creature's attack range. The breath coming out from the divine dragon's mouth creased the skin on their faces when he spoke. Of course I summoned you to save me, son of Surging River Dragon King. Jiang Miao was stunned. You recognize me? Of course I do. The divine dragon stretched his body, trying to leave his coiled around himself position. However, with the chains penetrating his body, he couldn't stretch himself, but even he had managed to shake the palace. Come to think of it, you're my nephew. When you were just born, I even carried you, and you peed all over me. I even gave a flick on your little pee-pee. Jiang Miao's face flushed, and he turned back to look at Qin Mu with a troubled expression. Cult Master, don't tell anyone about this, he said in a low voice. Qin Mu smiled at him. So what about it? I also got my little pee-pee flicked by Grandpa Blind and Grandpa Cripple when I was little. This is an act of love from the seniors. Also, before your intelligence awakened, you licked my face when I was sleeping and covered it in saliva. Jiang Miao's face turned red like a cloth that was just dyed. He muttered, Can we not talk about this anymore? All right, but when you met me for the first time, you even pounced at me and rubbed my face before hanging yourself by the tail on my ear while crying Maha. Jiang Miao didn't want anything more than to find a hole to hide himself inside. With shame in his voice, he said, Cult Master, can we never mention that again? Qin Mu laughed loudly. After you become famous in the future, a divine dragon of an era, I will definitely tell your sons and descendants about this. I was also thinking, Junior brother Qin Yu is still waiting for your return. After we come back, how are you going to face him? Are you still going to cling to his body? Jiang Miao was stunned. The divine dragon was suddenly angered and asked in a sinister voice, Have you guys finished talking? Qin Mu walked a step back and said with a smile, Your uncle is furious, so let's not talk drivel but focus on the important matters at hand. This is your family matters though, so I shall just listen on the side. The chest of the divine dragon heaved up and down. After a moment, he composed himself and said solemnly, Jiang Miao, the brat with you is the junior brother of an evil man. He ain't a good thing and you need to stay farther away from him. You are my nephew and I'm your uncle, so you should help me break free. Jiang Miao hesitated. He looked at him back at Qin Mu with a troubled expression. You could hear my call, so you should know our bloodlines are close. Do you not trust me? Raise your hand. When our palms touch, you should know how closely related we are. The divine dragon said in a gentle voice. Jiang Miao raised his palm, and the divine dragon also raised his huge claw with a hint of excitement in his eyes. The instant before the palm and claw touched, the strange rune Qin Mu had left behind on Jiang Miao's palms suddenly shone with dazzling light. It instantly activated the hidden devil markings on the chains, and they shone brightly. The devil fire boiled and tunneled into the divine dragon, making him tremble violently from the burning sensation. His body distorted from the pain, and his roars rang out endlessly, shaking the hall. Jiang Miao hurriedly pulled back his hand and looked at Qin Mu. The youth smiled and walked over. He said leisurely, "Jiang Miao, your mother is Surging River Dragon King, and she died to protect you. There are countless Dragon Kings in the East Sea of Great Ruins worshipped in the Dragon King temples. This happened because they'd had no choice and were forced by the situation to petrify themselves. 20,000 years ago, when founding Emperor era came to an end and the disaster struck heaven and earth, the gods and devils of founding Emperor Celestial Heavens either headed to Carefree Village or chose to petrify themselves. So why didn't your uncle choose to petrify himself or head to Carefree Village? Don't you find it weird?" Jiang Miao was stunned. Qin Mu continued to speak. "Over here, Paramitha Ark that was headed for Carefree Village suffered an assault. It was ambushed and destroyed by the enemy before getting sealed. However, there were still descendants of Heavenly Works God race in Paramitha, Arkansas. To prevent them from breaking the seal and walking out, the enemy needed a strong practitioner to stay guard. And this guard, could it be your uncle?" Jiang Miao looked at the divine dragon. The expression of huge creature changed slightly, and he said coldly, "You'd rather believe an outsider and not your own uncle?" Qin Mu walked forward and looked up at the divine dragon. He suddenly said, "Jiang Miao, I've seen you a long time ago in Surging River Dragon Palace. The soul of your mother was floating around you and singing a sorrowful song in the dragon language. You were frozen by the mysterious ice, and there was a broken sword stabbed into your chest. The broken sword had pierced through your heart, and your mother had used her life to protect you, keeping you alive in anticipation that someone would revive you one day." Jiang Miao shed tears. After he was revived, he had gone to Surging River Dragon Palace with Qin Yu before and seen the skeleton of his mother. Your mother, Surging River Dragon King, was extremely powerful, so how could she die? Qin Mu's face was calm when he continued speaking. "Why did you not die even when a sword pierced your chest? Could the person that injured you have not killed you on purpose? Could their motive have been to make use of your injury to make your mother exhaust her dragon bead to extend your life? As a result, her cultivation fell drastically, making it easy to kill her. In that case, wouldn't it take a very close person to be able to get close to her while she's protecting you?" Jiang Miao's body trembled. Why didn't this uncle with remarkable abilities come to save you even when you were frozen for 20,000 years? Qin Mu asked. "Where's that broken sword that had pierced your heart?" "I have always kept it." Jiang Miao opened his mouth and spat it out. Qin Mu's gaze landed on the broken sword that had pierced through Jiang Miao's heart. Dragon blood still stained it. "Do you want to know the owner of the sword?" he asked. Jiang Miao's face filled with fear, and he shook his head. "Cult Master, my heart is very confused." Qin Mu raised his head and looked at the divine dragon. "If this is your sword, you can execute it to kill us easily and even sever the chains. You sensed Jiang Miao's aura and kept calling him because of this sword too, right? Now this sword is here, Senior. Please." The divine dragon narrowed his eyes and stared relentlessly at him. Qin Mu smiled. Suddenly, light flowed through that broken sword, and it rose into the sky with a roar. At the same time, the devil light on the chain shone brightly, and devil fire poured into the body of the divine dragon, burning him until he couldn't stop twitching. The magic power he had just gathered was broken once again. Clank! The broken sword landed on the ground. Qin Mu walked up and picked up the broken sword with a sigh. "Jiang Miao, your mother died unjustly." Jiang Miao raised his head and looked at the divine dragon in front of him. The creature laughed loudly and said sternly, "Only an outstanding talent can recognize current trends. Your mother and I were from the same dragon nest, transformed from the essence of the dragon vein. We were twin dragons. So why was she Surging River Dragon King and I only a Well Dragon King? The celestial heavens promised me more benefits, so I had to grab the chance. My sister was my proof of allegiance. However, so what even if I tell you? What can you do to me?" He looked ruthlessly at Qin Mu and sneered, That big senior brother of yours had abilities that surpass yours 10,000 times, and wasn't he still unable to kill me? He used all he knew, and yet he could only trap me here. Behind Qin Mu, a gate of heaven influence appeared and opened wide. In this world, there's nothing I can't kill. Big senior brother might not be able to kill you, but it's not a problem for me, he said indifferently. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 568, Slaying Divine Dragon with Heavenly Gate. The divine dragon looked at the gate of heaven influence with a look of suspicion. Jiang Miao asked in a low voice, "Cult Master, will you really be able to get rid of him?" "I don't know," Qin Mu said softly. Wide-eyed, Jiang Miao cried out, "Don't know. I haven't tested if this gate can kill gods or not. I've only killed devil experts of celestial being realm in the past. I was trying to scare him just now, since he has fallen to such a state, yet he still wants to act all high and mighty, so we need to be more ruthless than him no matter what." Qin Mu finished his explanation and apologized to the divine dragon. "Senior, if I can't kill you, please don't laugh at me." He was about to execute Gate of Heaven influence when the divine dragon looked like he'd remembered something, and his expression changed drastically. "Wait a minute." Qin Mu stopped, and Gate of Heaven influence instantly paused. He said very patiently, "Senior, please speak." The divine dragon stared at this gate of his with a hint of fear in his gaze. He screeched, "I've seen this gate before. What's your relationship with Mingdu Heavenly King? He also has a gate like this." "Mingdu Heavenly King also has Gate of Heaven influence?" Qin Mu asked with suspicion. "I remember seeing a person open Gate of Heaven influence in Ghost Valley. Could he have been the Mingdu Heavenly King you're talking about?" "You're a descendant of Mingdu Heavenly King? No wonder. No wonder you can also open this gate," the divine dragon said in a trembling voice. Qin Mu shook his head and said with a smile, "My surname is Qin, Qin of Carefree Village. Who is this Mingdu Heavenly King? Is his surname Qin as well?" The divine dragon seemed to not be listening to him though, having fallen into a deep and terrifying recollection. He muttered to himself, "Mingdu Heavenly King controls a gate connected to Yudu. Countless strong enemies died in his hands, and Founding Emperor conferred him the title of Heavenly King, ordering him to open Yudu. Founding Emperor had great ambitions and wanted to annex Yudu as well. He wanted to control the marvel of life and death, but he angered Earth Count. Earth Count wasn't willing to submit, so Founding Emperor ordered Heavenly Works God Race to forge a divine knife. Mingdu Heavenly King sliced off a huge piece of Yudu with it, and Founding Emperor ordered people to construct Fengdu in that land. Qin Mu was stunned. Mingdu Heavenly King sliced off a piece of Yudu and turned it into Fengdu? He was so powerful. By stealing some territory of Yudu, Mingdu Heavenly King had angered Earth Count. However, Mingdu was clever, so he petrified himself and his primordial spirit escaped into Fengdu. Back then, the gods and devils that had died under his gate were uncountable, for which he was conferred to be the Heavenly King in charge of the souls. "This gate of yours, it's impossible for it to be the same as his." Qin Mu's eyes lit up and he hurriedly asked, "Senior, I've seen a stone statue in Ghost Valley with a gate that connects to Yudu behind it. However, it sealed up gods and devils with a beehive seal. Could that person have been Mingdu Heavenly King?" The divine dragon was in a daze while muttering to himself. "Your gate cannot be the same as his. You don't have the ability to hurt me. You're just a country bumpkin that's as weak as a hen dragon." Qin Mu's face flushed, and he said, "Senior, you're insulting all humans like this. I'm pretty sure I've seen this Mingdu Heavenly King before, and according to my guess, he should only be a fake overlord body. He didn't cultivate to my standard at all." The divine dragon came back to his senses and sneered, "You call this gate as Gate of Heaven influence? Truly ridiculous. This gate was known as God-slaying mysterious gate during Founding Emperor era, for even the gods from the 9 heavens above and the devil gods from the 9 underworlds below couldn't escape it. Once the door opened and closed, gods and devils would have their souls returned to Yudu, giving it the name God-slaying. You don't even know that, so it's obvious that yours isn't the orthodox one. Come slay me. Let me see what abilities you have. Qin Mu spun around, and devil chi from Yudu leaked out from Gate of Heaven influence. It was extremely dense as it spread through the hall. The gate opened up and swept toward the divine dragon. Hold it! Cold sweat rolled down the forehead of the divine dragon as he stared at the gate that was about to consume him. Qin Mu stopped, being very patient. What does Senior want to say? What's your cultivation? The divine dragon asked in a hoarse voice while staring at Gate of Heaven influence. Junior has cultivated to 6 Directions realm, but I've also awakened my 7 stars divine treasure. The divine dragon was stunned. 6 Direction realm with 7 stars divine treasure awakened? What is this logic? Yet even if we take that you're on 7-star realm, you actually want to kill me like that? Ha 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 ha. You are truly an ignorant hen dragon that's not afraid of a real dragon. He relaxed and said proudly, Let me see how you slay me. Qin Mu continued to execute Gate of Heaven influence, and more of Yudu's devil chi spread out. Suddenly though, the divine dragon shouted out, Hold it! Qin Mu's patience waned, and he couldn't help hurrying. Senior, if you have anything to say it all at once. The divine dragon sneered at him. Little brat, for trying to slay me, I will eradicate your whole family, are you clear? This seed you've planted today, it will result in your family being wiped out in the future. Qin Mu nodded and continued to execute Gate of Heaven influence. I'm clear on that. If you don't die, come and wipe out my family anytime. Gate of Heaven influence shifted, and cryptic voice came from Qin Mu's mouth. He chanted the hard to understand Yudu's devil language. The divine dragon hurriedly said, Hold it! This gate of yours is different from what I've seen before. What's the language you are speaking? Whoosh! Gate of Heaven influence became even more towering when it swept past his body. Inside the gate was pitch-black darkness. Within it, a pair of incomparably huge, curved horns could be faintly seen emanating with flames. The gate came to an abrupt stop then, and the body of the divine dragon turned stiff. Suddenly, a head crashed to the ground, and the body relaxed. The dragon turned limp like a dead snake, motionless. Qin Mu scattered Gate of Heaven influence, and an intense pain came from the heart of his brows. A drop of black blood flowed down. Qin Mu hurriedly covered the heart of his brows, but the stinging pain became more and more intense. The pain was so unbearable that he knelt on the ground and hugged his head. From a few steps away, Jiang Miao had seen that when Gate of Heaven influence took in the divine dragon, a huge mouth suddenly appeared in the darkness, swallowing the primordial spirit of the divine dragon in one bite. Jiang Miao was in a daze. The malicious mouth had been incomparably evil, and even he was frightened. When he came back to his senses and checked on the divine dragon, he couldn't help feeling astonished. The body had no more breath left. Its primordial spirit had indeed been swallowed by the huge mouth instead of entering Yudu. Cult Master Qin. There seems to be a ghost in this gate of yours. Cult Master Qin. Jiang Miao heard Qin Mu's whimpers, and he hurriedly came over to help him up. Qin Mu was trembling from the intense pain, and from his chest, his jade pendant suddenly shot off beams of faint light, forcing back the stinging pain. I'm fine. I just suddenly felt my head aching. Qin Mu looked around in a daze and pushed away Jiang Miao's hand. He shook his head and said, It's much better now. It should just have been a side effect of executing Gate of Heaven influence. Strange. This kind of weird incident had never happened before when I did this in the past. Jiang Miao looked blankly at the heart of his brows, and Qin Mu glanced at him. He asked with a smile, What do you see? There's a bloody mark at the heart of your brows, and there seems to be something inside, he said with astonishment. Qin Mu hurriedly took out a mirror and checked his reflection. He indeed saw a bloody marking at the heart of his brows. It was long and narrow, about an inch or more in length. The two ends were pointy while the center was slightly wider. What was even weirder was that the bloody mark bulged out slightly. It looked as though he had knocked his head and it was swollen. He stretched his hand and touched the bloody mark. There seemed to be some round thing inside, yet he didn't feel any pain when he exerted some force on it. Could I have knocked my head after that intense pain? That thing is moving. Qin Mu was shocked. His finger had clearly felt the thing under the bloody mark moving. Could I have been possessed by the divine dragon? He hurriedly executed his primordial spirit and looked into his body. He didn't discover any abnormalities after searching for half a day, and even when his primordial spirit came to the heart of his brows, he also couldn't find the thing left behind by the bloody mark. Zhang Miao examined the heart of his brows carefully and suddenly raised a finger. Cult Master, look at my finger. Qin Mu did as told, and Zhang Miao moved his finger while looking at the heart of his brows. Instantly, Qin Mu realized that the thing in the bloody mark was moving along with the finger. Zhang Miao tested and let out a sigh of relief. It should be an eye below the bloody mark. An eye? Qin Mu was puzzled. Great educational heavenly devil scriptures did have some strange techniques for him grow a third eye, but he hadn't transformed into Saturn Sovereign or Mars Sovereign, so where did the third eye come from? Cult Master Qin, I saw a ghost in that gate of yours just now, Zhang Miao said after composing himself. He remembered the sight he had just seen and shuddered without feeling cold. When my uncle was swallowed by your gate of heaven influence, his primordial spirit was pulled out and fell toward the god with horns. At that moment, a huge mouth suddenly appeared and ate my uncle's primordial spirit. A huge mouth appeared to eat your uncle? Stunned, Qin Mu rubbed his forehead. There are numerous monsters with ferocious nature in Yudu, condensed from Yudu's broken souls and devil nature. They are malicious and terrifying. Could this have been the act of one of them? Zhang Miao shook his head. I don't know about this. I only saw that huge mouth swallowing my uncle. It gave a cruel smile before vanishing, and your gate closed shut. Qin Mu pondered it for a moment, then sighed. Earth Count's control over Yudu is getting weaker and weaker. As a result, all these monsters are running out. We came here in search of a true dragon to explain the writings on the true dragon's nest. But now we are out of leads again. Suddenly, he saw that the chains had fallen off the divine dragon, and the devil writings on them no longer flowed. This made his heart skip a beat. Crap! 10 miles star sand calamity formation will also stop. Qin Mu sprinted out and saw the yellow sand flowing like a dragon in the sky above the canyon. It rushed back into the huge cauldron. Meanwhile, on both sides of the canyon, the runes on the walls were burning up and turning into ashes. In the sky full of yellow sand, Xingyan was covered in blood as he dragged himself over with heavy footsteps. His expression was very dark. Qin Mu hurriedly ran over and hugged the huge cauldron with a grunt. He couldn't pick it up, however. The star sand was simply too heavy for him to carry. He roused his vital qi and tried to execute the star sand in the cauldron, and a few grains of star sand flew into the sky, slowly floating forward. Qin Mu's face instantly turned blacker than that of Xingyan. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 569, Owner of Emperor's Disc. This star sand that big senior brother made is too heavy. I can't execute it at all with my abilities. Qin Mu abandoned the huge cauldron and turned to rush into the huge palace hall. Zhang Miao watched him rush back in a hurry and jump onto the divine dragon's body, not knowing what he was about to do. Qin Mu executed dragon rearing scriptures, but how could it work when the dragon was already dead? His primordial spirit had even been swallowed by a malicious spirit, so there was no way to borrow the cultivation of the divine dragon. He might have been able to face Xingyan, but alas. Qin Mu looked at Zhang Miao, then shook his head. His cultivation is too weak, even inferior to mine, so I won't get much power even if I use dragon rearing scriptures. Teleportation, divine art. Runes flew around his body, and he was prepared to escape with Zhang Miao. However, with his cultivation, he was only able to bring Zhang Miao dozens of miles away at most. This kind of distance was only a matter of seconds to Xingyan. Before his teleportation runes could even be executed, though, they suddenly stopped moving and froze in the air. Not only were the runes frozen, but even Qin Mu and Zhang Miao were restricted. They couldn't move. Xingyan walked into the hall with a gloomy face and stretched out a hand. When he spread apart his fingers, they were still dripping with blood. After he patched his divine bridge and reached the celestial palaces to become a god, his cultivation had an astonishing raise. His abilities were simply too powerful and could easily restrict Qin Mu. He had suffered heavy injuries in the 10 miles of yellow sand, but he was a god and had immeasurable power. Even with the remnants of his magic power, he could still trap Qin Mu. Cold sweat rolled down Qin Mu's forehead as he forcefully squeezed out a smile. Senior brother Xianxia, I will just return the chest to you. What I want isn't the chest, but you, Xianxia said before spitting out bloody phlegm. The wounds on his body were of various sizes, but all looked extremely horrifying. Flesh could be seen in many places, and in a few even white bone. If one was to think of it, he was truly unlucky. First, he had been trapped in Permitha Ark, which was incomparably dangerous, for half a year. All kinds of seals and killing formation were everywhere, and he still needed to face some mute's harassment from time to time. The moment he came out, he met Qin Mu and were lured into 10-mile star sand calamity formation. The youth had left easily, yet he sank into the formation and his situation got worse and worse. Only by unleashing all that he knew was he able to endure for so long. If it wasn't because the formation had suddenly stopped, he definitely couldn't have lasted much longer and would have been turned into dust. Great divine physician, why is it so difficult to catch you? Xianxia asked after swallowing the blood that rushed up his throat. Luckily, you still haven't escaped from my grasp. Incomparably intense darkness poured out from under his feet. It was his life and death divine treasure. He walked over as though he was walking on black water. At that moment, 2 eyes appeared in the darkness under his feet. Next, a beautiful woman revealed her face, and her alluring figure floated into view. Xianxia looked like he was stepping on the black water, and the woman was like his reflection. However, one was a man and the other a beautiful woman. This was an extremely peculiar sight. The 2 people walked toward Qin Mu in unison, raising and putting down their feet at the same time. Right before the darkness touched Qin Mu, Xianxia suddenly stopped and no longer walked forward. The beauty also stopped. It was as if she could only move if Xianxia moved. A male voice came from the mouth of the beauty. It was very rough and heavy. Xianxia, why aren't you walking forward anymore? Take him into your life and death divine treasure and hand him to me. Once I have him, our agreement will be finished. Luli, I've already found him for you, which is what I had promised. Whether or not you can capture him is your own business. I'm not fond of being threatened, Xianxia said indifferently. Under his feet, the beauty was stunned for a moment. She then sneered. You think that just because you went to the celestial palaces and became a fake god, you can bargain with me? Xianxia, how dare you? Bargain? Xianxia shook his head. This isn't bargaining. You sent me out of Yudu, so I helped you find him. This is the trade. I've already done my part. As for whether you can capture him, that's your problem. He stretched his hand in a grabbing motion, and the body of the divine dragon rose while Qin Mu and Zhang Miao suddenly fell to the ground. They regained control of their bodies and could execute vital qi as they liked. Qin Mu was bewildered. He raised his head to see the body of the divine dragon shrinking. His chains fell off due to the change in size. Xianxia grabbed the divine dragon, then straightened it out and coiled around his waist like a belt. He suddenly said coldly, Luli, get out of my life and death divine treasure. Under his feet, the beauty flew into a furious bout. How dare you talk to me like this? Do you think a small god like you can escape from my grasp? My divine treasure, who are you to talk? Scram! Xianxia shouted out, and his primordial spirit suddenly appeared in his life and death divine treasure. Sun, moon, and 5 elements lined up, and whenever their light came close, the beauty hurriedly avoided. She was forced to retreat by the light of the 7 stars. Xianxia, you dare scam a high god? I will definitely. Scram! God's aura burst forth from Xianxia, and his clothes and hair fluttered. The divine treasures in his body shone brightly and lit up his life and death divine treasure, forcing her back into Yudu. Xianxia's aura returned to normal, and his fluttering black hair also fell back down to drape his shoulders. With clothes back to normal, he looked at Qin Mu. Where's my chest? Qin Mu hesitated for a moment, then took out the chest from his Taotai sack. The chest sprinted toward Xing'an, but turned its head back when it was halfway across to look at Qin Mu. It then sprinted toward Xing'an and came to his side. Xing'an turned around and walked out of the hall while saying indifferently, "Divine Physician Qin, don't let me meet you again. Why aren't you killing me?" Qin Mu suddenly asked. "Why should I kill you?" Xing'an stopped and turned his head. "I have my own principles when doing things. The secrets of Magpie Bridge, secrets of Mysterious Guide, and secrets of Divine Crossing have helped me cultivate to godhood and escape from worrying about my lifespan. So the grudge between us is written off. Me finding you was just to settle the agreement between me and Lu Li. Now it is also written off. You are a great master, but do you think I can't know and act as one? You underestimate me too much." Qin Mu was stunned for a moment, then smiled. "I have indeed underestimated you in the past." Xing'an saw that smile of his, and the corner of his eyes twitched. He gave a cold snort while turning to walk out of the hall. "Don't smile at me. I will come back to find you. You have founded numerous things like 18th Sword Form, Primordial Spirit Guide, and I'm someone who appreciates talented people, but when your corporeal body reaches a level where it comes into my view, I will find you. I want the corporeal body of an overlord body." Qin Mu was dumbfounded as he watched Xing'an leave into the distance. When Xing'an reached the huge cauldron, his gaze wavered. He was about to take the treasure when the star sand moved in the cauldron. It gradually rose and formed the shape of a young man. Astonished, Xing'an rushed away, crossing the 10-mile-long canyon in a flash. He was afraid that the formation might erupt once again. Qin Mu brought Zhang Miao out of the hall and saw a sand human standing in the center of the huge cauldron. The star sand flowed continuously on the surface. "Big senior brother?" Qin Mu probed. "Heavenly Saint Cult's founding master. I'm the current cult master, and I met Saint Woodcutter not long ago. Big brother, are you still alive?" The sand human opened his mouth, but it couldn't speak. Suddenly, it crumbled, and the star sand flowed on the ground to make a picture. Qin Mu hurriedly looked over and saw geographical maps all over the ground. Mountains and rivers, all of them were captured on the ground. The terrain in the geographical map changed nonstop, and Qin Mu hurriedly memorized them by heart. The star sand transformed over a dozen times before flowing back into the huge cauldron. Qin Mu frowned slightly then. Besides the first map, he had no idea about the other ones, and when he thought about Great Ruins, there was no place in it that fitted the other pictures. The first map of Great Ruins, but the other 13 didn't represent any terrain present in Eternal Peace or West Earth. It was also different from the terrain of Supreme Emperor Heaven. What is Big Senior Brother trying to say? Qin Mu narrowed his eyes. Heavenly Saint Cult's founding master had to have detected that the divine dragon died, and since it was his merit, he had activated his star sand to become his body to look at the situation. However, he was probably not in Great Ruins or Eternal Peace, but in another world, which was why his voice couldn't transmit over. Because of that, he used star sand to arrange the geographical map to guide Qin Mu to his side. The 14 geographical maps were incomparably complicated, so why should I go to find him? Qin Mu suddenly came to a realization. My horizons are narrow, but Saint Woodcutter must have seen the world and would definitely recognize all these maps. However, I might be able to find some clues from the first geographical map, so why don't I go over to take a look first? When he decided on that, he relaxed and said, "Zhang Miao, let's go." Zhang Miao acknowledged. Qin Mu suddenly turned back at that moment and hugged the huge cauldron. He tried to raise it forcefully while Zhang Miao scratched his head. "Aren't you going to help?" Qin Mu asked him in a shout. Zhang Miao went over in a hurry, and both their faces flushed as they used all their strength yet still couldn't lift the huge cauldron. Zhang Miao gasped for breath and tried to ask, "Cult Master, I think we should forget about it? Your big senior brother's abilities are too great, and even Xing'an didn't dare to take this huge cauldron away. We definitely can't carry it." Qin Mu could only give up. At that moment, though, he saw the chains that had shackled the dragon, and his eyes lit up. He sprinted over in a hurry. "It won't be too bad if we can at least take a few chains. They could hold a divine dragon, so the materials used to make have to be of the highest quality. Even if they were melted and turned into treasures, they would be of the highest grade among the highest grade. Jiang Miao could only follow over. The two of them dragged a thick chain forcefully, barely managing to get it out of the hall. Qin Mu opened his taotai sack and tried to put one end of the chain inside, but the chain was too thick and he couldn't put it in at all. On top of that, the other end of the chain was deeply embedded into the cliff and he couldn't pull it out. The two youths stared at each other out of ideas. Qin Mu was furious and turned to leave. To think you're my big senior brother, what a miser! Jiang Miao hurriedly followed after him, and Qin Mu flew into the sky with a gloomy face. He looked in the surroundings and checked the terrain, then chose the direction marked in the first geographical map. 2 days later, they came to a small village which was the marked location. Qin Mu and Jiang Miao walked inside and examined their surroundings. The small village was similar to all the ordinary village in great ruins. However, there were sculptures of gods with dragon heads and human bodies all around it. Why did big senior brother want us to come here? While feeling puzzled, Qin Mu saw a white-haired elder who was weaving a fishing net in front of a small straw hut. He hurriedly walked forward and bowed in a respectful greeting. "Elder, what is this place?" The white-haired elder looked at him with blurry eyes full of astonishment. "I gave the emperor's disc to Ling family, so why is it with you?" he asked with a smile. Qin Mu stared with his eyes wide open, speechless. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 570, Ancient Commander's Seal. The white-haired elder wore green clothing that had been washed pale. He placed the fishing net in his hands, and Qin Mu felt something moving on his chest. Next, he saw the emperor's disc change into a small dragon that popped its head out from under his collar. When Jiang Miao saw the small dragon, he couldn't help changing back into his true form. He became a small dragon also and hid behind Qin Mu with a low growl that was both respectful and fearful. "Maha!" The little dragon with its head out was a true dragon lord. It opened its mouth to yawn before slowly crawling out from Qin Mu's collar and slithering to the hand of the white-haired elder. It coiled up in his hand and closed its eyes sleepily. Immediately, numerous young men and women walked out from the small village, surrounding Qin Mu and Jiang Miao. One of the robust young men asked, "Old ancestor, are they here to create trouble?" The white-haired elder smiled. "No, they aren't. Don't scare them. These two have some fate with our village." The young men and women lost their enmity then and examined Qin Mu and the little dragon Jiang Miao that was behind him. Qin Mu was astonished. The young men and women all had vigorous vital qi, and every one of them was hiding their light under a bushel. However, when they had surrounded them, Qin Mu had heard 7 explosions from opening the divine treasures coming from the youngest girl's body, making it clear that she was an expert on divine bridge realm. Yet she should have been the weakest in the village as everyone was protecting her. Even the weakest villager in this place that was by no means large was on divine bridge realm. Qin Mu had thought that disabled elderly village was the strongest village in Great Ruins, but from the looks of it, Great Ruins was really a place of concealed talents. Besides the Emperor's disc, you also have the true dragon's nest. The white-haired elder looked astonished when his gaze landed on the youth's waist. Qin Mu took off the taotai sack and brought out the true dragon's nest, placing it respectfully in front of the white-haired elder. "May Senior take a look at it." The spirit of the true dragon lord immediately rose and swam into the true dragon's nest. When the other villagers saw it, their spirits rose, and they wanted to tunnel into the dragon's nest with that little dragon. However, they resisted the urge. Could the villagers here be dragons and not humans? Is this a village of dragons? Qin Mu made his own guesses after noticing everyone's reaction. "The Emperor's disc of Ling family was stolen by my grandpa Cripple, who gave it to me. As for the true dragon's nest, it was refined by dragon-rearing sovereign of high heavens. Since I subdued him, the true dragon's nest also fell into my hands. Senior, you are the god that refined the Emperor's disc, right?" The white-haired elder's gaze landed on the true dragon's nest, and he spoke with a smile that was not a smile. "Back when I refined the true dragon lord into the Emperor's disc and entered Middle-earth to find a successor, I met a young fellow with extraordinary aptitude and comprehension. He was the old ancestor of Ling family. I saw that he had the chi of the true dragon, so I gave the Emperor's disc to him and imparted the dragon language and technique on the Emperor's disc. But what could I do that his mind wasn't on this, and he went to chase after some girl instead. In the end, he managed to catch that girl, but by then he had forgotten most of the dragon language and technique I had taught him. It was then that I knew that this young fellow wasn't the true dragon lord. Qin Mu had once heard Ling Yuxiu talk about this before and had found it funny, but never had he expected it to be true. However, I'm lazy by nature, and I had been asked by another to refine the true dragon lord and find a successor. Since the successor wasn't useless, I let him be, the white-haired elder said with a smile. Who would have thought that even though the young fellow wasn't hard-working, his descendants were all very hard-working and managed to strengthen Eternal Peace Empire to its current state. Since Emperor's disc fell into your hands and you also have the true dragon's nest, you must be after the technique on it, right? Senior, I'm indeed rather interested in the technique on the true dragon's nest. However, I've come here because of Heavenly Saint Cult's founding master. He is my big senior brother, and he left a geographical map which marked this village. So I found my way here, Qin Mu explained respectfully. The white-haired elder was stunned and pondered over it. Heavenly Saint Cult's founding master? Is that the young fellow whose name is Wei Fengshui? Qin Mu hesitated. He didn't know what was the name of his big senior brother. The white-haired elder saw his expression and smiled. He once came to find me and asked me how to gain merit. He wasn't a bad youth, and his abilities were extremely extraordinary. Teacher had found a good disciple. However, if Wei Fengshui wanted to become a saint, it was very hard for him to gain merit, as the path he walked was teacher's path, and it is very difficult. I couldn't teach him anything. If you are his junior brother and have also come to ask me on how to become a saint, I can't teach you anything as well. The teacher he had been mentioning probably referred to Saint Woodcutter, who once was the heavenly teacher of founding Emperor Celestial Heaven. He'd been in charge of teaching all the princes and princesses of founding Emperor's bloodline. May I ask if my big senior brother mentioned where he was planning to go? Qin Mu asked. The white-haired elder shook his head. He didn't say where he planned to go, but he left something behind. If he made you look for me, it should be for that item. He stood up and walked into the straw hut. After a moment, he brought out a red box and handed it over. Qin Mu opened it and saw a palm-sized token engraved with a picture of a ferocious beast. Qin Mu flipped it around, but he still didn't understand what it was. He sincerely sought enlightenment and asked, "May I ask, Senior, what is the use of this token?" This is a commander's seal used to mobilize soldiers. There's a formation with positions for gods in it, but it's extremely ancient, so it's most likely useless now, the white-haired elder said. Even I don't recognize some of the runes on this, so it might be a commander's seal from High Emperor era or even earlier. He took back the commander's seal and activated it with his magic power. They saw stars rise from the commander's seal and swirl around them. These stars are the positions for gods. If they're all taken, they could use this formation to face the enemy and fight against it. Qin Mu raised his head and noticed that the stars that had flown out of the commander's seal weren't truly stars. They were apparitions, but there was an extremely high number of them. There were probably several thousand stars, and his heart couldn't help shuddering. He muttered, "A formation of several thousand gods. What kind of battle requires several thousand gods and devils? Your horizons are too narrow." The white-haired elder retrieved his magic power, and the star apparitions vanished. He said with a smile, "During founding Emperor era, there were more than a few such battles. The formation in this commander's seal isn't of much use anymore, but it's still a pretty nice collectible." Qin Mu looked at him in bewilderment. "How is the formation useless?" The white-haired elder handed the commander's seal to him and said, "The great Tao of heaven and earth have changed, so the formation in the commander's seal is no longer compatible with it. The formation also has no more power left. This item is very ancient, and it's no longer compatible with the Tao. It's probably something from tens of thousands of years ago, but as for which era it comes, that's not something that I know." Qin Mu placed the commander's seal back into the red box and put it away in his Taotai sack. Since founding Master Wei Fengshui had left the red box and the commander's seal with the white-haired elder, it meant that this item was definitely very important. His reason to lead Qin Mu to the village was definitely for it. Forgive this junior's impudence, but may I ask for senior's name? Qin Mu said. The white-haired elder smiled at him. I thought a descendant of Qin family would know my name, but you actually don't. I'm a dragon vein that attained Tao and cultivated itself into a true dragon. Back then, I followed after your ancestor. Because I was just born and didn't know how to talk. I could only cry out Maha, so your ancestor named me like that. My surname is Ma and my name is Hacking. He used it to make fun of me. Qin Mu looked at him with a weird expression. Ma Hacking? Zhang Miao popped his head out from Qin Mu's back and said timidly, Maha. The white-haired elder continued his story. Afterwards, I became an official in the celestial heavens, which had 4 great celestial palaces. I oversaw Green Dragon Palace and its 60 star god divisions. All of them was under my administration. I was honored as Green Emperor, but I disliked this title since it was too overbearing, and I changed my name to Qing Huang. Now that founding Emperor Celestial Heavens was eradicated and Green Dragon Celestial Palace no longer exists, you can just call me Elder Qing Huang. Qin Mu greeted him once again and said, Qin family's 107th descendant Qin Mu pays his respects to Elder Qing Huang. Elder Qing Huang hurriedly motioned for him to straighten. Please rise. When I saw you coming here, I immediately knew your bloodline and guessed you were a descendant of founding emperor. You want to learn the dragon language of this true dragon's nest? I can teach you. Qin Mu was overjoyed and bowed in gratitude. Thanks for the trouble, senior. Elder Qing Huang brought him into the true dragon's nest and said, I see that your paths, skills, and divine arts have already gained small success, and you seem to be cultivating both God and devil paths. You seem to have opened your divine treasures of both, which is very strange. Seeing how you have already found your path, learning the technique of my dragon race will only be decorating something that's already perfect. On the other hand, for this little dragon, you should receive a lot of benefits. Zhang Miao, which was a little dragon at that moment, tiptoed behind Qin Mu. When he heard what Elder Qing Huang said, he shrunk his head back and said, Maha! Elder Qing Huang smiled at him. No need to thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank him. That's right, Qin Mu. I can sense something very strange about your body, and it's on your neck. It seems to be a jade pendant with a very powerful seal hidden inside it. Is this what the senior has sensed? Qin Mu took out his jade pendant and said, It was crafted by Earth Count, and he said it's to seal my devil nature. I was born in Yudu and got invaded by the devil nature lingering in there. So Earth Count crafted this for me. As long as I wear it, it can suppress my devil nature. Elder Qing Huang looked at the jade pendant and sneered. Earth Count sealed your devil nature? Why would he be so nice? Give me that jade pendant. I'll help you undo the seal. This? Qin Mu looked at him with a troubled expression and said in a low voice, Senior, King Yama once tried to undo it and suffered the curse of the jade pendant. Also, Fu Riluo of the devil race also tried to undo the seal and got cursed as well. He ended up in quite a miserable state. My master and King Yama said that it's best to not undo the seal in the jade pendant and that I shouldn't let the jade pendant leave my body. Otherwise, terrifying things will happen. What is there to fear from a mere curse? Elder Qing Huang said with a smile. However, if even teacher said so, then there must be a reason. Come, let me clear your doubts in regards to the true dragon technique on the true dragon's nest.